Chapter 1939. Lin Sun raised his head and saw a bounty list hanging above the city wall. All of them were flowing with magical Taoist light and reflected lines of pictures. More than half of the bounty list was marked with Lin Sun's name and appearance, which were vivid. The Wilderness Taoist Court, Qiankuan Taoist Court, Panwu Taoist Court, Blood Kailan Battle Clan, Taowu Battle Clan, Heavenly Ghost Battle Clan. Just looking at the names of these orthodoxies and clans was enough to make any cultivator crazy. The reward was enough to make any cultivator crazy. The least reward was 1,000,000 Tao gems and various treasures. There were even more rewards than this, and even more that could not be counted. Lin Sun is really an anomaly. I'm afraid that even the descendants of the 6 major Tao courts are not as famous as him. After all these years, I don't know if he's dead or alive. If he's alive, where is he now? If I were him, I would never set foot on the starry ancient path in my life. Otherwise, I would definitely die a terrible death. The crowd was talking about it. Lin Sun, a peerless, ruthless person who killed in Kunlun ruins, and a person who had the fortune of becoming an emperor and an ancestor. Who in the world didn't know that? But at the same time, everyone knew that Lin Sun only had one identity now, the most wanted criminal on the starry ancient path. Listening to people's discussion and looking at the eye-catching list, Lin Sun couldn't help but flash a trace of coldness in the depths of his black eyes. It was just Lin and city in Qingzhou, but there were so many bounty posters for him. It could be imagined that there would only be more such bounty posters in other places in the primordial world. Lin Sun Jintian Xianyue seemed to feel emotional, but he wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. "What's wrong with him?" Lin Sun asked. "An innocent man gets into trouble because of his wealth. He killed in Kunlun ruins. No matter how many great forces he angered, it's impossible for him to cause such a big storm." Jintian Xianyue thought for a long time and said calmly, "In the end, it's because the fortune he obtained is too great. It's enough to make any orthodoxy unable to sit still." Lin Sun nodded and said no more. Sooner or later, he would make these forces who issued the bounty pay the price. In Lin and city it was a bustling scene. No matter if it was the taverns, tea-houses, or medicine shops, all of them were imposing. This was a port city. There were all kinds of cultivation resources transported here from other worlds in the starry sky. Even some native cultivators of the primordial world liked to head to the fairy cities to choose and purchase some rare treasures. Lin Sun stopped at an inn and asked Golden Moon to buy some books related to the primordial world. As a newcomer, he needed to familiarize himself with the primordial world as soon as possible. That evening, Jintian Xianyue brought back a large pile of jade slips, such as the Hongmeng Landscape Illustrated Handbook, the Hongmeng Forces Distribution Notes, the Hongmeng Ancient and Modern Changes Notes, the Qingzhou Region Gazetteer. There were all kinds of ancient books. Opening these ancient books, Lin Sun found that the contents were as vast as the sea, which dazzled him and gave him a headache. In the final analysis, the primordial world was too big and all-encompassing. Almost no ancient book could describe everything in detail in the primordial world. "Young master, most of the books that can be bought on the market are incomplete. I heard that in the dark yellow Tao Court's Scripture Reserve Pavilion, there's a primordial world scripture. It was personally compiled by an emperor realm figure during the primeval times, and it records everything that happened in the primordial world since ancient times." With a trace of longing in her eyes, Jintian Xianyue said, "I heard that by reading this sutra, you can see the changes of time and feel the vicissitudes of the world. Not only can you deeply understand the mystery of the primordial world, but it can also play an incredible role in tempering your mind." Primordial Phenomenon Sutra. The ancient books that could be called sutra were all first-class heritages in the world. "I'm afraid we can't read this kind of precious sutra." Lin Sun shook his head. Of course, he was also tempted, but he knew that if he was not the descendant of the black-yellow Taoist court, he was doomed to be unable to see this magical sutra. It took Lin a night to read all kinds of ancient books he bought, and he gradually had a rough understanding of the primordial world. In the early morning, Jin Tianxianyue suddenly said, "Child, 3 days later, there will be a large-scale auction in Lin An City. It is said that a piece of divine material from the unknown place will be auctioned, which has caused a great sensation in the city." Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. Divine material? Yes, this divine material is extremely mysterious. No one can recognize its origin and use. After the appraisal of the treasure appraisers, they can only vaguely infer that the value of this divine material is immeasurable. Jin Tianxianyue said, "Are you interested in it?" Lin Sun asked. Jin Tianxianyue took out a jade slip and handed it over. "These are some treasures that will appear at the auction. I'm not very interested in the unknown divine material. I just want to buy the treasure called star-scale dark iron." Lin Sun took the jade slip and began to read it. The jade slip recorded some extremely attractive treasures, which were extremely scarce and rare in the market. When he inadvertently glanced at the name of one of the treasures, Lin Sun's heart moved. Space Boundary Crystal. It was a kind of precious crystal condensed at the beginning of the formation of the world. It was branded with the original power of the law of space. If it could be refined, it would be enough to further the practitioner's control of the law of space. For other practitioners, although this kind of treasure was rare and precious, it was of no use at all. But for a saint king like Lin Sun, Space Boundary Crystal was a treasure that was enough to attract them. It should be known that the Saint King realm controlled the power of the Tao field, and the control of the Tao field was inseparable from the understanding of the law of space. For example, Lin Sun had only condensed the embryonic form of the Tao field so far. On the one hand, it was because he was too demanding on himself and tried to condense an extremely perfect and unique Tao field. On the other hand, it was because his control of the profound meaning of space had not yet reached the consummate level. If he could refine a piece of space boundary crystal, it would definitely play a beneficial role in condensing the Tao field. But to Lin Sun's disappointment, the space boundary crystal that would appear at the auction was only a thumb-sized piece. "Well, it doesn't hurt to take this opportunity to have a look." Lin Sun thought for a moment and made a decision. In all these years of cultivation, Lin Sun had never participated in any auction. He wanted to experience it and feel the charm of an auction. Seeing Lin Sun agree, Jin Tianxianyue's eyes lit up. She was very interested in the star-scale dark steel that would appear at the auction. "Child, then I'll go by the entry nameplate." Jin Tianxianyue's voice was cheerful, and her beautiful face revealed a smile that could turn all living things upside down. "It's just an auction. Why do I need to buy an entry nameplate?" Lin Sun was startled. When he was about to ask Jin Tianxianyue, she had already left. Lin Sun shook his head and began to think about the next step. "When the auction is over, I'll go to Cloud State." Cloud State was one of the 49 states in the primordial world. It was separated from Green State by 7 states. The journey was extremely long, and it was no different from traveling through 7 worlds. But Lin Sun had to go. Because Xuanji Taoist sect was located in Cloud State. Lin Sun was very calm. Now that his identity was Yu Xian and he had just arrived, he needed some time to adapt. Traveling through 7 states could be regarded as a journey, and he could go deeper to understand some of the features of the primordial world. At the same time, outside Lin An City, buzz, accompanied by the sound of obscure Taoist markings, a group of figures walked out of a large teleportation ancient formation that spanned across states. The leader was the descendant of the imperial Kong family, Kong Yu, the successor of the primitive Taoist court. Lin An City, looking at the towering city in the distance, Kong Yu's eyes were filled with hatred. Originally, he would have waited in front of the city, waiting for the boat to arrive, and the heavenly sound pavilion would obediently hand Lu Qinyan over to him. But because of his impatience, he waited in front of the Brahma Earth world in the Clear King Star area, which caused a disaster, and he was almost killed by Sword Emperor Fufeng. At the thought of this, Kong Yu's heart was filled with uncontrollable anger and resentment. Go and find out the whereabouts of Lu Qinyan and this man. As he spoke, Kong Yu handed a jade slip to the person beside him. The jade slip was imprinted with the appearance of Lu Qinyan and Lin Sun, who were disguised as Yu Xian. Yes. The old man beside Kong Yu received the order and hurried away. A quarter of an hour later, the old man returned and said quickly, "Young master, I went to the Xing clan to inquire about the news. The boat from the Heavenly Sound Pavilion in the Ziheng Star area has left the primordial world last night. Lu Qinyan did not enter the city, but the man named Yu Xian entered the city yesterday." Kong Yu's face suddenly darkened. "Is the news reliable?" The old man said, "Young master, Lin and city is controlled by the Xing clan. When I took out Yu Xian's portrait, a Xing clan saint who guarded the city gate yesterday recognized him at a glance." Kong Yu's eyes flashed. "Just him alone? Not accompanied by an old man?" The old man shook his head. That Xing clan saint only remembered that Yu Xian entered the city with a woman, and that the woman was not Lu Qinyan. Kong Yu was stunned. Then, as if relieved of a heavy burden, he let out a long sigh and said, "It seems that I guessed right. A supreme figure like Sword Emperor Fufeng would not easily set foot in the primordial world. When an emperor traveled, he would make a great noise. Even if he concealed his aura, he would still be immediately detected by some supreme figures in the primordial world. Let's go to the Xing clan. We must investigate this matter carefully. If it's confirmed that Yu Xian is alone," Kong Yu's eyes flashed with a glint of murderous intent, "then this time, I promise that he will never leave Lin and city." He dared not to hate Sword Emperor Fufeng. Now that Lu Qinyan was not here, he could only vent his anger on Yu Xian. Immediately, they walked straight into Lin and city. Chapter 1940. In the evening, Jintian Xianwei brought back 2 nameplates for the auction. "Child, this auction is unprecedentedly grand. I heard that many powerful forces and clans in Qingzhou will participate in it." Jintian Xianwei said, "According to my speculation, it seems that they are all for the unknown divine material." Lin Sun nodded and asked, "Miss Xianwei, how many Tao gems do you think I need to buy that space boundary crystal?" Jintian Xianwei thought for a while and said, "There was a space boundary crystal in White Emperor City before. It was only the size of a copper coin, but it was sold at the price of 500,000 Tao gems. The space boundary crystal that will appear in this auction is about the size of a thumb. According to my speculation, it is almost worth 1 million Tao gems. But things in the auction are often different from the market price. If someone is determined to get this treasure, the price will be higher." After hearing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but gasp. A thumb-sized space boundary crystal was worth 1 million Tao gems. If it was auctioned, the price would be higher. This was a sky-high price. Not to mention ordinary cultivators, even sage kings would not be able to take out so many Tao gems. Although Lin Sun was not short of money at present, he deeply realized at this moment that it would be extremely difficult to rise in the primordial world without abundant Tao gems. The higher one's cultivation was, the ordinary treasures could no longer satisfy his cultivation. Like Lin Sun's current cultivation, the treasures in the eyes of ordinary cultivators were of no use to him at all. In short, what he needed were resources that could satisfy the cultivation of the Saint King realm. However, such resources were all precious and rare. Some natural treasures that could only be encountered by chance were destined to be extremely expensive and even unobtainable. "Miss Xianwei, I'm going to walk in the city alone." After thinking for a while, Lin Sun made a decision. A trace of imperceptible disappointment flashed in Jintian Xuanyue's star-like eyes. She nodded and said, "Then I will wait for you in the inn." Until she saw Lin Sun off, she sighed in her heart. Yu Xian obviously didn't trust her completely. Lin and city was extremely large. No matter if it was the streets or buildings, they were obviously prepared for cultivators, and there was utterly no trace of ordinary people in the city. As a fairy city, Lin and city was undoubtedly extremely bustling and prosperous. Peddlers selling goods from all over the world could be seen everywhere. There were also cultivators who came from all directions to choose and exchange for items. With his hands behind his back, Lin Sun wandered in the city for a quarter of an hour and stopped in front of an antique building. Listen to Wind Pavilion. A strange look flashed through Lin Sun's eyes. When he first arrived at the Diu world from the Tianxu world, he had entered the Whistling Wind Tower to gather information. He had thought that the Whistling Wind Tower was just a force in the Diu world. Who would have thought that in this primordial world's Lin and city, there was also the power of the Zephyr Pavilion? Looks like this organization that specializes in collecting and selling information is far larger than I imagined. Lin Sun walked into Tingfeng Tower while thinking, "I need some information." After stating his purpose, Lin was led into a secret room isolated from the outside world and received by a middle-aged man in a gray robe. "If I want to know the way to the true dragon world, how many Tao gems should I pay?" Lin Sun deliberately probed. The middle-aged man in a gray robe paused for a moment and smiled playfully. "Taoism peer, in the past, there were many people like you who wanted to inquire about the way to the true dragon world, and someone offered a sky-high price of 8 million Tao gems. Immediately, he sighed, "It's a pity that Tingfeng Tower can't provide this information." Lin Sun said, "Is there anything in this world that Tingfeng Tower doesn't know?" Being questioned in such a way, the middle-aged man in a gray robe didn't take it seriously and said with a smile, "The primordial world is so big and the starry sky ancient way is so vast that it's impossible for us to know everything in the world." Lin Sun nodded and stopped probing. He asked the question he wanted to know, "Where is the black market in Lin and city? How can I enter it?" A strange look flashed through the eyes of the middle-aged man in a gray robe. He stretched out 5 fingers and said, "This information is worth 50,000 Tao gems." The black market was a place for underground trading, which couldn't be exposed to the light. Okay. Lin Sun took out 50,000 Tao gems. When he left Tingfeng Tower, Lin Sun had already inquired about the name of an underground black market, Misty House. It was an underground force with a mysterious origin and amazing background. It was said that there were underground black markets of Misty House in many cities in the primordial world. In the depths of a remote alley, there was an inconspicuous simple courtyard. After Lin Sun arrived, he looked up and walked straight to the courtyard. Clatter, the courtyard rippled like an illusionary light curtain, and Lin Sun's figure disappeared in it. In the courtyard there was another scene. It was like a small world, with crisscrossing streets and tall buildings. The world was covered with wisps of looming mist. There were many figures of practitioners on the street, all in a hurry. Some wore bamboo hats, some wore masks, and some covered their figures with black robes. There were also some cultivators who set up stalls on the streets to sell their wares. However, it was different from the hustle and bustle of the outside world. In this dim world that was shrouded in mist, it was very quiet. There was no noise and it seemed very strange. Even when trading, the buyer and the seller talked by voice transmission. This was the underground black market in Lin and city. It was the territory controlled by the mysterious Misty House. Lin Sun glanced around and immediately judged that almost all the practitioners who entered the black market had disguised themselves to hide their identities. "I'm Xie-san. Do you need any help?" A lean man came over. He was dressed in black, with a totem of clouds and mist embroidered on his left shoulder. This meant that he was from Misty House. "I want to sell some treasures," Lin Sun said casually. "Fellow practitioner, there are 2 ways to trade here. One is to sell your treasures to Misty House, but the price will be lower than the market price. Xie said quickly, for example, a treasure that can be sold for 100 Tao gems in the outside world can only be sold for 70 Tao gems at most here. 70%? Yes. What if I want to sell a large number of treasures? Lin Sun asked. Xie eyes lit up and he said, it depends on how many treasures you have. I will definitely give you a satisfactory reward. I'm worried that you can't afford it, Lin Sun said casually. Xie was stunned for a moment and said with a smile, fellow practitioner, I'm not boasting. There's nothing in Lin and that misty house can't afford. Lin Sun didn't take it seriously and asked, what's the other way? Xie pointed to the stalls on both sides of the street and said, set up your own stalls and sell them by yourself, but Misty House needs to charge you a fee. Lin Sun immediately gave up the idea of setting up a stall. He had too many treasures with him. If he set up a stall, he didn't know when he would sell them. Let's go. Take me to Misty House, Lin Sun said. Xie was refreshed and said, fellow practitioner, this way please. In his eyes, this guest seemed ordinary, and it was impossible for others to see the depth of his strength. However, his words and actions had an invisible, imposing manner. Guests like him often had good things with them, so they were most welcomed by Misty House. Xie took Lin Sun along the street and walked into the distance. Along the way, cultivators of all kinds could be seen everywhere. There were also many stalls, but most of the items sold were not attractive to Lin Sun. But on the way, suddenly there was a dispute. In front of a stall, a woman in black said angrily, you still don't admit it? All the treasures sold in this stall are the treasures used by my father when he was alive. Miss, I bought these treasures from someone else. I've never known your father. The stall owner was an old man in gray with a cold voice. If you make trouble again, don't blame me for being rude. The black-clothed woman was angered to the point her entire body trembled, and her eyes seemed to be on the verge of spitting flames. Half a month ago, my father suddenly died, and all the treasures in his possession vanished without a trace. Yet now, these treasures have appeared here. If it wasn't you, then who did it? Many cultivators nearby were watching the scene with a playful look. This was the underground black market. Most of the treasures sold in each stall were illegal and involved a lot of people. Otherwise, they would not be sold in the black market. Obviously, the woman in black came to seek revenge. She recognized that her father's relics were sold in the black market. She suspected that the stall owner was her father's murderer. The old man in gray said in a low voice, girl, this is the black market. Believe it or not, no one will care if I kill you now. Boom. Suddenly, he reached out and grabbed the woman's snow-white neck, lifting her in the air. Her cheeks were red, and she could not struggle at all. The cultivators nearby couldn't help shaking their heads. This woman in black was too stupid. She came to the underground black market to seek revenge, but she was so weak. Wasn't she courting death? Doesn't Misty House care about the dispute here? Lin Sun asked. Xie said, we are only responsible for providing the trading venue and maintaining the normal trading order. Things like revenge happen almost every day. We can't do anything about it. Lin Sun said, what if I want to do something about it? Xie was stunned for a moment and then said with a smile, Taoism Pier, don't make fun of me. This kind of thing has nothing to do with you. You don't have to pay attention to it. Lin Sun said, how about helping when I see injustice? Xie realized that Lin Sun might be serious. He couldn't help but hesitate. Taoism Pier, what if you intervene in this matter and get yourself into trouble? That depends on your own ability. Lin Sun's eyes were gloomy. A hero saving a beauty? Not really. He was not a good person. He just felt that he would feel uncomfortable if he didn't pay attention to this kind of thing. Since he started his cultivation, he had never shown mercy to his enemies. He had killed countless enemies, so he was not a good person in the strict sense. Chapter 1941. The black-clothed woman felt suffocated. The man who killed her father was right in front of her, but she was not only unable to take revenge, but even had to pay for it with her own life, which made her feel desperate. She could only blame herself for being too angry and impulsive. She had never thought whether she could defeat the enemy with her own strength. But father's death. Who would be able to remain calm when they finally found their enemy after so much difficulty? Tears flowed out of her eyes. The black-clothed woman sighed in her heart and remembered what her father often told her when she was a child. In the world of practitioners, the strong prey on the weak. It's so cruel that there's no room for mercy. Father will protect you all your life when he's alive. But if he's gone one day, you have to take good care of yourself. At that time, she didn't understand her father. She disliked her father for nagging too much and never treated her as an adult. But now what she missed most was her father, and what she regretted most was that she didn't understand her father's good intentions earlier. Remorse, annoyance, anger, and helplessness drowned her mind like a tsunami and turned it into endless despair. Fellow practitioner, this woman is very beautiful. Why don't you give her to me? Suddenly, someone let out a frivolous laugh. The gray-clothed old man said, "Okay, how about selling her to you for a Taoist crystal?" A Taoist crystal? The man was stunned. In my eyes, this idiotic woman is only worth a Taoist crystal. The gray-clothed old man said indifferently. There was a burst of laughter nearby. Almost all the practitioners who came to the underground black market were not good people, and there was no lack of vicious people. So they didn't care about the life and death of a woman. Let her go. At this moment, Lin soon appeared in the field, and looked at the gray-clothed old man with cold eyes. Oh, the hero saves the beauty? Tut tut, there's actually such a person in this world. Before the gray-clothed old man could respond, the other practitioners present began to jeer, and their words were full of ridicule and ridicule. Friend, do you see? They are all laughing at you. Are you sure you still want to save her? The gray-clothed old man said with disdain. You're so righteous when you do evil, but you're ridiculed when you do good deeds. The world is really becoming more and more disappointing. Lin Sun sighed. Do good deeds? The crowd burst into laughter again. The gray-robed old man said coldly, In this world, good and evil, black and white, good and bad are never important. What's important is that whoever has the greatest power can decide life and death. Really? Lin Sun said, but he didn't move. Boom. The gray-clothed old man felt a copious and irresistible force pressing down on him, and his body felt as if it was being pressed down by a myriad of mountains, causing him to fall to the ground with a thump. At the same time, the woman in black was rescued. The roaring laughter in the surroundings stopped abruptly while many cultivators revealed solemn expressions. Only now did they realize that the young man they mocked was actually a powerful character. It's you, Lu Bai. Suddenly, the woman in black let out a cry of disbelief. The gray-robed old man who was suppressed on the ground seemed to have broken through his disguise and turned into a handsome young man. How could it be you? We're already engaged, and my father treats you so well. You? How could you do such a thing? The black-clothed woman's beautiful face turned ghastly pale while her entire body started trembling, and she seemed to not dare believe her eyes. The nearby cultivators couldn't help but gasp. This fellow actually killed my future father-in-law? How ruthless! The young man's expression was obviously flustered, and he wasn't as composed as he was earlier. The woman in black's tears were blurred because this blow was too great. Her father had actually been killed by her fiancé. This caused her to be on the verge of collapse. Lin Sun flicked his finger when he saw this. Bang! The young man's entire body twitched while he let out a howl of pain, and his cultivation was crippled. Young miss, avenge enmity and enmity. After he spoke these words, Lin Sun turned around and left. From the beginning until the end, no one dared to stop him. No one dared to ridicule him any longer, and many people even faintly aroused a trace of admiration in their hearts. In this world, there really aren't many experts that do good like this. Lin Sun hadn't walked halfway when a shrill and miserable cry resounded from behind him. Lin Sun didn't have to turn around to know that the young man had definitely been killed. As for the sorrow and bitterness in the woman's heart, Lin Sun could only feel sympathy. From the beginning until the end, he was merely a passerby. Taoism peer, although I don't agree with what you did, I admire you very much. On the way, Xie-san was silent for a moment and said, however, in this underground black market, I still have to advise you not to have any kindness in your heart. Lin Sun didn't care. Before long, under the guidance of Xie-san, Lin Sun entered an ancient hall. As soon as he entered, Lin Sun instantly noticed that the hall was covered with layers of restrictive formations, which were extremely strict. When Xie-san left, he wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Finally, he sighed softly, shook his head and left. In the hall, there were 3 people sitting. In the middle was a middle-aged man in a black robe. His hair was as black as ink, his eyes were like cold lightning, and his breath was gloomy and unpredictable. On his left and right were a white-haired old man and an enchanting and glamorous woman. The white-haired old man was stroking a golden abacus with kind eyes. The glamorous woman was wearing revealing clothes. Her breasts were towering, her skin was snow-white, and a pair of slender and plump thighs were lazily crossed. Her beautiful eyes were watery, and her whole body exuded a mature and attractive charm, as tempting as fire. Lin Sun glanced around and judged that the middle-aged man in a black robe was a great sage, while the white-haired old man and the glamorous woman were at the true sage realm. This kind of power was amazing in Lin and City. After all, Lin and City was only one of the tens of thousands of cities in Qingzhou. It was not easy for 3 people of the sage realm to appear in the black market located in the underground world of Lin and City. Of course, no matter how extraordinary they were, Lin Sun didn't care. With his current realm, he even dared to fight with the Emperor-to-be. How could he take a great sage and 2 true sages seriously? What do you want to sell? The middle-aged man in a black robe asked in a deep voice. He looked Lin Sun up and down like a knife, but he didn't see anything. At this time, Lin Sun's breath returned to its original state. He was ordinary and deliberately hid his identity. How could he be seen through by the other party? How many Taoist gems is such a precious medicine worth? Lin Sun turned his hand and took out a precious medicine. 3,600 Taoist gems. The middle-aged man in a black robe looked at it and seemed to be a little disappointed. He casually gave a number. Isn't it too little? This precious medicine was worth at least 5,000 Taoist gems in the outside world. The enchanting and glamorous woman pursed her lips and said with a smile, Taoist gems, this is the black market. The price is naturally much lower than the outside world. Unless you have a lot of treasures to sell, the price is negotiable. Lin Sun waved his sleeve, and a dense pile of precious medicine was piled up. There were hundreds of kinds of them, shining and colorful, and the fragrance of medicine filled the air. What about these? The middle-aged man in black showed a serious look. He looked carefully for a moment and said, They are all in good condition. They can be sold at 75% of the price in the outside world. What about these? Lin Sun waved his sleeve again, and bottles and jars of medicinal pills flew out. The glamorous woman suddenly got up and went forward to check them one by one. After a while, her eyes brightened and she said in surprise, Taoist gems, you have a lot of good stuff with you. Some of these medicinal pills are treasures of those ancient orthodoxies. The eyes of the middle-aged man in black flashed and he said, Madam Yen, how much are they worth? They can be sold at 80% of the market price in the outside world. The glamorous woman gave a number. Don't worry, there are more. As he said, Lin Sun took out some treasures such as rare treasures, ores, spiritual marrow, and medicinal herbs, piling them up like a hill. At this time, the middle-aged man in black robe and the glamorous woman were slightly short of breath. The white-haired old man who had been stroking the golden abacus stood up directly and came to those treasures to check and identify them one by one. In his hand the golden abacus crackled. They are all first-class goods. They can be bought at 90% of the market price, the white-haired old man said in a deep voice. He looked up at Lin Sun with a strange look in his eyes. It seemed that he had seen some clues from those treasures. All of a sudden, the middle-aged man in black robe and the glamorous woman were stunned, and their expressions became strange. They seemed to be a little shocked. A single person had actually brought so many treasures to sell. Moreover, every single one of them could be said to be of first-rate quality. This was too unusual. 90%? Not enough. Lin Sun shook his head. These treasures were all trophies he had collected over the years. For the middle-aged man in black robe, each treasure was of great value and could even be described as rare and precious. But for Lin Sun, these treasures were of no use, so he planned to sell them. Taoist gems, this is the limit. After all, this is an underground trading place, and the treasures you are going to sell are all stolen goods. The eyes of the middle-aged man in black robe flickered, and he said slowly, "Since you are selling stolen goods, the price can't be equal to the market price in the outside world. 95%. If the hidden mist house can eat it, all of this is yours. If not, I'll go somewhere else," Lin Sun said casually. The middle-aged man in black robe frowned, and his face became gloomy. Anyone who entered the underground black market was a shady character. Once his identity was exposed, he would definitely be targeted by his enemies. Moreover, in the black market, only strength mattered, not rules. Therefore, when selling stolen goods, no one dared to bargain with the hidden mist house. Forget it. It's rare to meet such a big seller. Let's earn less this time. Old Tong, calculate the price of all treasures, Madame Yen said with a smile. The white-haired old man nodded, and the golden abacus in his hand rattled. After a while, he raised his head and reported a number with no expression, a total of 9.35 million Tao gems. Both the middle-aged man in black robe and Madame Yen were shocked, and they seemed to be shocked by the number. But Lin Sun sneered in his heart. How could this old thing cheat in front of him? Chapter 1942. Before Lin Sun came to the underground black market, he seemed to be wandering in Lin and City, but in fact, he had already inquired about the value of all kinds of treasures to be sold. The price quoted by the white-haired old man seemed to be close to 10 million Tao gems, which could be regarded as an amazing fortune. In fact, according to Lin Sun's own calculation, even at 90% of the market price, his treasures were at least 18 million Tao gems. It was almost twice as much as the more than 9 million Tao gems reported by the white-haired old man. From this, it could be seen how black-hearted this old man was. At this time, Madame Yen sighed with amazement. More than 9 million Tao gems in the underground black market of Lin and City is definitely one of the biggest deals in the past 1,000 years. The black-robed middle-aged man also sighed with emotion, and then he said with embarrassment, "Taoism Peer, if you are satisfied with this price, we can also buy this batch of goods, but it will take some time to collect Tao gems. How about we give you 3 million Tao gems first, and the rest will be returned to you 1 million Tao gems every month. How about that?" Seeing this, Lin Sun was amused. Did these bastards really think that he was a fat sheep to be slaughtered? They even paid in installments. If he really agreed, the other side would definitely not admit it. Everyone, don't pretend. Since you are not sincere, this deal is not worth it. As he said, Lin Sun was about to put away these treasures. Wait. The black-robed middle-aged man's face darkened, and he said coldly, "Taoism Peer, your stolen goods are related to many ancient orthodoxies. If they are exposed, I am afraid it will be very disadvantageous to you." There was a strong threat in his voice. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and said, "Is this how the fog-hidden house does business? If so, won't it disappoint the people in the world?" Madame Yen couldn't help but burst into laughter. "Fellow Taoist, Everything that happens in the underground black market can't be seen in the light of day. Everyone in the world is bitterly disappointed, but it has nothing to do with us. Instead, it's your stolen goods. If we expose them, I'm afraid you'll be in trouble. The white-haired old man said expressionlessly, "Take this opportunity to give you a word of advice. The rules of the underground black market are very simple, that is, whatever the fog-hidden house says is the law." Lin Sun laughed. This situation was very interesting. A great sage and two true sages were actually threatening him, a top holy king with a fearless attitude. "Aren't you worried that you'll choke to death if you can't eat it?" Lin Sun said calmly. The black-robed middle-aged man and the others looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh. "Fellow Taoist, I can see that you are extremely confident in your own strength, but this is the Hidden Mist House's territory. You have to agree to this deal even if you don't want to." As the black-robed man spoke, he flicked his finger. Dang! On the table before him, a formation disc buzzed. All of a sudden, all of the restrictive spells in the hall were activated. Wind and thunder roared, and water and fire burst forth. Lin Sun, who was in the center of the hall, was completely submerged by the dense Taoist patterns. What a pity! It's not easy to meet such a big seller. Madame Yen giggled. "I'm more interested in these treasures." The white-haired old man's eyes were burning with greed. "With these treasures, why should I worry about not being able to step into the eminent saint stage?" The black-robed middle-aged man also laughed. "I didn't expect to catch such a big fish this time. This is a rare opportunity. If it was an ordinary person, I wouldn't even bother to make a move." But his smile suddenly froze at this moment. His eyes almost popped out, and his face was full of disbelief. "Boss, how do you think we should divide these treasures? Do we need to inform Old Crane? After all, he is now in charge of the underground black market in Lin An City." Madame Yen said coquettishly, "The three of us can divide the booty. If Old Crane knows it, he will definitely scold us for breaking the rules." The white-haired old man said in a low voice, "Boss?" Madame Yen was just about to say something when she suddenly noticed that the black-robed middle-aged man's expression was not right. She turned her head and trembled all over, showing a look of surprise. Almost at the same time, the white-haired old man's pupils shrank. He saw a figure walk out of the heavy restrictive spells as if he was walking on the ground, unscathed. How could this be possible? The three of them were all horrified. It should be known that the restrictive spells covering the hall were set up by a Taoist pattern grandmaster for several years. They were so powerful that they could kill Eminent Saint. Could it be that the opponent's cultivation was more powerful than that of Eminent Saint? At the thought of this, the black-robed middle-aged man and the others all turned pale, and their hands and feet felt cold. "I'm here to do business, but you plan to kill me and take my treasures. The Hidden Mist House is too unscrupulous." Lin Sun's eyes were deep. From the moment he stepped into this hall, he had noticed the power of those restrictive spells. But with his attainments in Taoist pattern, how could he care about them? It was ridiculous that these idiots regarded these restrictive spells as their trump card. "Taoist peer, we were just testing you. Now you have been recognized by the Hidden Mist House and are qualified to do business with us." The black-robed middle-aged man took a deep breath and squeezed out a stiff smile. "Yes." Madame Yen also nodded quickly. "Why are you afraid of him? Old Crane is still here. If he is really strong, why doesn't he dare to take action?" The white-haired old man snorted. "Puff!" Lin Sun raised his hand and patted the void gently. The white-haired old man's body lost all vitality in an instant and turned into ashes. Greenwood Taoist body, the power of life and death. The black-robed middle-aged man and Madame Yen felt their blood was numb. They were so scared that their souls almost came out of their bodies. They knelt down together. "Taoist peer, please calm down. We were blind just now. Please forgive us," Madame Yen pleaded in a trembling voice. The black-robed middle-aged man trembled and said, Taoist peer, didn't you want to make a deal? In order to make up for our mistakes, we decided to buy these treasures at the market price. Lin Sun looked indifferent. Sorry, I'm not in the mood to make a deal with you now. He waved his sleeve. Boom. The black-robed middle-aged man, who was a great sage, turned into ashes in an instant like the white-haired old man. Madame Yen screamed in fear and collapsed to the ground. A pair of white and plump thighs were exposed on the cold ground. Her mature and charming face was full of horror. Taoist peer, peace is the most important thing in business. They offended you before and now they have paid a heavy price. Why don't you stop now? A hoarse voice suddenly sounded. Accompanied by the voice, a dwarf-like little old man with crimson hair and beard suddenly appeared in the main hall. Old Crane, help! Help! Madame Yen screamed excitedly, like a drowning person grabbing a straw. The dwarf old man ignored her and just looked at Lin Sun. Lin Sun looked indifferent and said, "Did you see what happened before?" The dwarf old man sighed softly. "I just arrived." "What a coincidence!" Lin Sun sneered. The dwarf old man smiled bitterly and said, "Taoist peer, do you still remember Xie-san? He informed me." Lin Sun said thoughtfully, "I see." He still remembered that on the way here, Xie-san specifically reminded him not to have any kindness in his heart. And when he led Lin Sun here, Xie-san wanted to say something but didn't. Obviously, he knew what would happen to Lin Sun, but he didn't say it at that time. What surprised Lin Sun was that Xie-san went to find the dwarf old man. Could it be that he couldn't bear to see Lin Sun being killed? If so, this guy still had a conscience. Thinking of this, Lin Sun relaxed a lot and said, "In that case, let's call it a day." The dwarf old man secretly breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Taoist peer, when I came here, a big shot of our hidden mist house was also there. He especially told me that he hoped to meet you and apologize in person." Lin Sun said with a faint smile, "Is it another trap to kill me?" The dwarf old man smiled bitterly. "Taoist peer, your spiritual power is unfathomable. How dare we offend a distinguished guest like you?" "What about her?" Lin Sun pointed at Madame Yen who was lying on the ground. A cold light flashed in the dwarf old man's eyes. "Don't worry, Taoist peer. Before you leave, I will give you an explanation." Madame Yen was instantly dumbstruck, and her entire body shuddered. Even though this senior crane was inconspicuous like a dwarf, he was a ruthless person, and once one was punished by him, even if one didn't die, one would still lose a layer of skin. At the thought of this, Madame Yen trembled with fear and lost her soul. "Taoist peer, please." The dwarf old man smiled and cupped his hands. Lin Sun nodded. The underground black market in Lin An City was like a small world. In the center of it there was a pitch-black ancient palace. In front of the palace, a slender figure stood alone. Dressed in a cyan dress, with long black hair glowing with the luster of the eternal night, she held a blood umbrella between her snow-white slender fingers. The umbrella's cover and handle were dazzlingly red, as if they had been soaked in blood. The cyan dress, black hair, blood umbrella, and the black palace behind her formed a magnificent and enchanting picture. Seeing this scene from a distance, Lin Sun's pupils slightly narrowed and he felt a kind of soul-stirring and strange feeling. At this time, the dwarf old man showed a respectful expression and said in an almost pious tone, "Miss, the distinguished guest is here. You can leave now." In front of the black palace, the woman in the cyan dress holding up a blood umbrella said. Her voice was feminine with a touch of unique magnetism, as if a god sleeping in the dark was talking in a dream. The dwarf old man bowed respectfully and then left quietly. "I'm Qing. Nice to meet you, child. I'm quite ashamed of what I did before. I'd like to do my best to compensate you." The young woman spoke in a light voice. The blood-red umbrella in her snow-white fingers was suffused with a mysterious and obscure energy that concealed her appearance, causing it to be faintly visible, and only a pair of clear and deep eyes that were like obsidian could be seen. "There's no need for compensation." Lin Sun shook his head. With his current eyesight and cultivation, he couldn't see through the cultivation of the woman in the cyan dress, which made him feel awestruck. In fact, from the attitude of the dwarf old man just now, he realized that the identity of this woman with enchanting and mysterious aura was bound to be extraordinary. Chapter 1943. In front of the Black Palace, there was a blood umbrella. Under the umbrella, there was a graceful cyan dress and black hair. Compensation is necessary. The hidden mist house will buy all the treasures that child sold before at the market price. The woman who called herself Qing Ying had a feminine and magnetic voice. As she spoke, she turned her snow-white fingers and a purple jade token appeared. And, as long as child holds this token, all treasures can be sold at 90% market price when trading with the hidden mist house. Whoosh! The purple jade token turned into a stream of light and appeared in front of Lin Sun out of thin air. The jade token was the size of a palm, lustrous and translucent. It was surrounded by purple mist and turned into two characters, Hidden Mist House. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun took the token and said, "Thank you very much." Then, Lin Sun left. Qing Ying didn't refuse and watched him disappear gradually. A wisp of contemplation appeared on a faintly discernible face beneath the scarlet-red umbrella. Without a sound, an old man who looked like a dwarf appeared and said respectfully, "Mississippi, has the child left?" "Yes." "Where is Madame Yen?" "Please give me your instructions, Mississippi. Don't you know what will happen if you don't follow the rules?" The dwarf old man suddenly broke out in a cold sweat and said, "I see." Qing Ying turned around and walked into the Black Palace with the blood umbrella in her fluttering cyan dress. "I want all the information about that child in a quarter of an hour." The feminine voice floated in the air, but she had already disappeared. The dwarf elder wiped the cold sweat off his forehead, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. As the person in charge of the hidden mist house in Lin An City, the dwarf old man was like the ruler of the underground black market. He didn't pay attention to ordinary great sages, but in front of Qing Ying, he seemed so humble and submissive, not daring to show any disrespect at all. Only he knew how lofty Miss Qing Ying's status in the hidden mist house was. "Madame Yen, don't blame me for being ruthless. I'm just following orders." The dwarf old man sighed in his heart and turned to leave. In less than a quarter of an hour, the dwarf old man appeared in front of the Black Palace again. "Miss, I've got the news," he said respectfully. The door of the hall silently opened. Inside the hall, mist filled the air, and a graceful green figure sat alone. The blood umbrella silently floated above her. "This person's name is Yu Xian. He arrived at Lin An City yesterday on the support boat of the Heavenly Sound Pavilion in the Purple Hung Galaxy. I caught a passenger on the support boat, and after a brief interrogation, I found something strange." With that, the dwarf elder took out a jade scroll, bowed, and handed it over. Everything Lin Sun had done since he boarded the boat was recorded in detail in the jade slip. For example, he served as Lu Qingyan's guard, killed a group of cultivators from the Wilderness Taoist court, was targeted by Wu Ming and the others from the Hidden Land realm, and suppressed the disciples of the Jintian clan. A wisp of extraordinary splendor couldn't help but suffuse Qing Ying's eyes when he saw this, and he seemed to have vaguely guessed something. As she continued to read, she was slightly startled. That night, Wu Ming and the others from the Hidden Land realm and Jin Tian Xianyue fought together. After they were defeated by Yu Xian, Sword Emperor Fufeng personally took action, but later, Yu Xian didn't die. On the contrary, Wu Ming and the others from the Hidden Land realm disappeared. Sword Emperor Fufeng declared that he would protect Yu Xian and let Jin Tian Xianyue accompany Yu Xian as a Taoist servant. Everything seemed so abnormal. What on earth happened that night? Qing Ying was lost in thought. After a long time, she asked, "Is there any other news?" The dwarf elder hurriedly said, I heard that Kong Yu from the Wilderness Taoist court led people to attack the support boat, but he was also suppressed by Sword Emperor Fufeng. This Kong Yu is really stupid. Why would a Sword Dao great emperor who has been famous for 30,000 years be afraid of his background? Qing Ying's voice revealed a touch of disdain. Immediately, she said, "Old crane, who do you think dares to kill the descendants of the Wilderness Taoist court on the starry ancient path without hesitation?" The dwarf elder was stunned. Without waiting for an answer, Qing Ying continued, "There might have been a long time ago, but in the past 100,000 years, almost no one dared to do so except for those ruthless fellows in the dark world." The dwarf elder deeply agreed. Just the name of the Wilderness Taoist court could intimidate the heavens. The descendants of this orthodoxy were treated respectfully everywhere they went. Qing Ying's voice was soft and had a unique charm. However, 6 years ago, someone did this in the Kunlun ruins. Moreover, he didn't just kill the descendants of the Wilderness Taoist court. Among the 6 great Taoist courts and the 10 great war clans, countless descendants were killed by this person. Lin Sun. The dwarf elder almost blurted out. "That's right, it's him." Qing Ying said, "Old crane, don't you think Yu Xian and Lin Sun's style of doing things is somewhat similar?" The dwarf elder gasped, "Miss, are you suspecting that the person just now was Lin Sun? In this world, the appearance of a fearless Lin Sun has already shocked the entire starry ancient path. Will there be another person like him in this world?" Qing Ying's voice was faint, "Maybe, but it's impossible for him to be a powerhouse from the Yu clan, an imperial clan." Old Crane's eyes were filled with a strange light. "Miss, rumor has it that Lin Sun holds a fortune to become an emperor or ancestor." "Why don't we know?" Qing Ying interrupted. "This is just my guess. I've observed Yu Xian with a secret method before and noticed that although he's disguised himself, his true appearance isn't Lin Sun. There must be something else." Old Crane was stunned and said, "Miss, do you have any plans?" "Just wait and see," Qing Ying said indifferently. Qing Ying said indifferently, "Remember, without my order, don't leak out what happened today." Old Crane's heart trembled, and he quickly agreed. "Yu Xian," Qing Ying murmured in her heart, "I didn't expect to find such a mysterious person like you in Lin An City. As long as you continue to trade with the Hidden Mist House, we're destined to meet again." After leaving the underground black market, Lin Sun went straight to the inn where he was staying. Currently, he had an additional 24 million Dao crystals on him, which was around 6 million more than he had estimated. Lin Sun knew that this might be the so-called compensation that Qing Ying mentioned. At the thought of this mysterious, enchanting and stunning woman, a bloody umbrella and a cyan dress came to Lin Sun's mind. Immediately, Lin Sun shook his head. After the auction, he would immediately go to Lin An City, and he might not have many opportunities to see her in the future. When he arrived at the gate of the inn, Lin Sun suddenly stopped. In his spiritual awareness, he instantly caught 2 eyes secretly peeping at him. A man in brocade clothes was standing in front of a stall picking things. The other one was a few hundred meters away. It was a woman in plain clothes drinking tea in a tea house. Lin Sun didn't stop and walked calmly into the inn. In the room, Jintian Xianyue was making tea. Her fingers were slender and white, and her movements were smooth and pleasing to the eye. "Xianyue, I seem to be stared at." Lin Sun walked into the room, sat on one side, picked up the teacup on the table, and took a sip. "Ah!" Jintian Xuanyue's white and beautiful face blushed, and her fine eyelashes trembled slightly. "What's wrong with you?" Lin Sun was stunned. What kind of reaction was this? Jintian Xianyue pointed to the teacup in Lin Sun's hand and said, "Child, I just drank this cup of tea." Lin Sun's body stiffened, and his face was also embarrassed. He said, I didn't notice it. Please don't mind." Jintian Xianyue hummed and changed the topic. "Child, you just said that we were stared at?" Lin Sun nodded and frowned. "Yes, we just arrived in Lin An City and didn't provoke anyone. but someone secretly stared at me when I returned. This is strange. Do you want me to check it out? Jin Tian Xuanyue's expression also became serious. Don't alert them for the time being. Lin Sun pondered. When the auction is over, we will leave. At that time, we will see if they will take the next step. Jin Tian Xuanyue nodded. At the same time, in the Xing clan, as the largest force in Lin and city, the Xing clan occupied a large area, like a small paradise, with rockery, flowing water, pavilions and terraces, showing the atmosphere of immortals everywhere. If this matter is settled, I, Kong Yu, promise to treat you well in the future. Kong Yu sat boldly at the head of the table in a large hall. His face was filled with arrogance. The hall was full of important figures of the Xing clan, both men and women, and the weakest of them was in the true sage realm. Please rest assured, child. In Lin and city, there is nothing that the Xing clan can't do. A majestic man in a purple robe said respectfully. He was Xing Lushui, the head of the Xing clan, a peerless sage king in the perfection realm, and an elder of the Purple Cloud Sword sect, which ranked third in Qingyun state. He was also a big shot in the whole Qingzhou state. But at this time, in front of Kong Yu, he appeared extremely humble. If you only rely on the strength of the Xing clan, I'm afraid you can't defeat Yu Xian at all. Kong Yu said with an expressionless face, but all of you don't have to worry. When the time comes, I'll join forces with you. Xing Lushui cupped his hands and said, As you command, child. Kong Yu was very satisfied with Xing Liushui's attitude. Yu Xian will definitely not stay in Lin and city for too long. The day he leaves is the day we make a move. Kong Yu decided. Before that, your Xing clan must keep a close eye on this person. If he dares to spoil my plans, then don't blame me for turning hostile. As soon as he finished speaking, he stood up and left. From the beginning until the end, Xing Lushui and the other great figures behaved obediently. Even when they were threatened by Kong Yu without holding back, they didn't dare to be displeased in the slightest. The reason was very simple. Kong Yu had the primordial Dao court behind him, a colossus that could crush the entire Xing clan in an instant. 3 days later, Lin and City, Donglai Treasure Pavilion. Chapter 1944. The sky had just begun to brighten, yet there were already numerous figures of cultivators converging towards the Donglai Treasure Pavilion from all directions. Donglai Treasure Pavilion was an industry of Donglai Taoism sect, the first orthodoxy in Qingzhou, which covered every city in Qingzhou. The treasures to be auctioned in Donglai Treasure Pavilion in Lin and were all rare, especially a piece of divine material from an unknown place, which naturally attracted many cultivators. Even many cultivators came from other places in advance. When Lin Sun and Jin Tian Xuanyue set off, they saw many saints along the way, including true saints, great saints, saint kings. Among them, there were even some powerful figures who had set foot on the top. Lin Sun had to sigh with emotion that the primordial world deserved to be the first world of the starry sky ancient path. Lin and was only one of the tens of thousands of cities in Qingzhou, but so many saints had gathered here. Such a scene could not be seen in other world. Young master, I've also sensed it. From the moment we left the inn until now, many people have been watching us in the dark. Jin Tian Xuanyue whispered to Lin Sun. She was dressed in plain clothes, and her figure was extremely tall and slender. Her long black hair was coiled into a bun, and her neck was snow-white. Her skin was sparkling and translucent. Only her fairy-like face had been disguised, and it only looked rather delicate, not breathtaking. However, she still attracted a lot of attention along the way because she exuded a noble aura with every movement she made. This was the charm of a peerless beauty. Her beauty was not only in her skin and bones, but also in her charm and temperament. Lin Sun nodded and said, "Don't pay attention to them." When they arrived at Donglai Treasure Pavilion, it was already crowded and very lively. But as Jin Tian Xuanyue took out 2 entry nameplates, they entered smoothly. The interior of the auction house was very large, covered with layers of restrictive formations, like a huge inverted bowl. "Two distinguished guests, please come with me." A beautiful attendant led the way in front. Lin soon knew that the two entry nameplates Jin Tian Xianwei bought were VIP seats, with a special private room that could isolate the detection of divine awareness. And just these two entry nameplates were worth 20,000 Tao gems. This price was enough to buy a saint treasure of slightly better quality. Not long after, the entire auction venue was filled with cultivators. According to Lin Sun's rough estimation, just the sale of the entrance nameplates would bring Donglai Treasure Pavilion nearly 3 million Tao gems. After Lin Sun and Jin Tian Xianyue sat in the elegant room, about half an hour had passed. A well-dressed beautiful woman walked onto the auction stage. Her red lips were slightly pursed, and her eyes were filled with a smile. "Welcome to the Donglai Treasure Pavilion. I am Pu Lanji, the auctioneer of this auction." His voice hadn't finished resounding through the air when a wave of exclamations of surprise resounded. "So it's her, Elder Pu Lanji of the Taoist sect of Donglai, a peak saint king renowned throughout the Green Province." No one had expected that a mere auction would actually invite a peak saint king to act as the auctioneer. This standard was already very shocking. However, it was also because of this that everyone was looking forward to the auction that was about to begin. There will be 37 treasures that will be auctioned off one by one in this auction. Even though the quantity is slightly lesser, I guarantee that every single treasure will not disappoint everyone. All right, without further ado, let's begin with the first treasure. As Pu Lanji's voice fell, a maid walked onto the auction stage, carrying a bronze box with both hands. The entire place became silent, and everyone's gazes looked over. As expected, the Donglai Treasure Pavilion did not disappoint. It had only just begun, but it had already ignited the enthusiasm of the cultivators present, causing a sensation. The Sun Moon Dragon and Phoenix Blade, an ancient unique treasure, and its quality far surpasses that of ordinary saint treasures. What's rare is that this is a pair of treasures that complement each other. It is said to be able to break through the barriers of space, and its power is unfathomable. As soon as Pu Lanji's voice fell, it caused an uproar. Everyone was shocked, and their gazes became heated. It should be known that anything that could be called an ancient unique treasure had experienced over 100,000 years of accumulation. Moreover, it was a pair of treasures that complemented each other. The most miraculous thing about it was its power. It could break through the barriers of space, which also meant that even if one was trapped in some hopeless situation, they could rely on this treasure to break through a path of survival. How could this not excite people? When Pu Lanji opened the bronze box, it revealed a pair of blades that flowed with a magnificent divine radiance. It developed the image of the sun and the moon, and the faint sound of dragons and phoenixes crying resounded. It was a shocking scene. Many people revealed infatuated expressions when they saw this, and their rapid breathing rose and fell. Even some of the bigwigs were interested in it. This was undoubtedly a pair of good treasures. Pu Lanji smiled lightly. She was very satisfied with this reaction. The starting price is 300,000 Tao gems, and each increment must be no less than 10,000 Tao gems. 400,000! As soon as she finished speaking, someone couldn't wait to speak out, and he increased the price by 50,000 in one go, causing an uproar. This pair of treasures is very extraordinary, and it just happens to be what I need right now. 500,000. I'm sorry, but I must get this pair of treasures. 600,000. In the auction hall, the sound of bidding rose and fell. In a short moment, the pair of Sun Moon Dragon and Phoenix Blades had been pushed to a sky-high price, and it was extremely bustling. In the end, this pair of treasures was won by a great figure sitting in a private room, and the price he paid was 1,300,000 Tao gems. It was the first time for Lin Sun to participate in an auction. He felt it was very fresh to witness the whole process of the first treasure being auctioned. However, although the sun, moon, dragon and phoenix blades were wonderful, they were not in his eyes, so he didn't bid from beginning to end. Jintian Xianyue had been calm and composed. She was experienced and knowledgeable, and occasionally explained some tricks of the auction to Lin Sun. The second auction item is a complete shedding of the ancient sage. It didn't take long for Pu Lanji to take out the second treasure. The shedding of the ancient sage. Isn't this the mystery of becoming a sage? Sure enough, I didn't come in vain. Only by becoming a sage can one set foot on the peak of the Saint King realm. With such a shedding, it's enough to get twice the result with half the effort on the road of the Holy Way. In the auction hall, there was a lot of noise and it was extremely lively. Many people were very excited. The two treasures at the beginning of the auction were already so rare. It could be imagined what would happen later. However, some people secretly lamented that with their financial resources, there was no way to participate in the auction. Lin Sun was very interested in the beginning, but gradually, he felt a little dull, because the treasures being auctioned were almost useless to him. As time went by, the treasures that appeared were more and more amazing. Just when Lin Sun felt a little bored, he suddenly noticed that the broken blade in his body was buzzing and ready to move at this moment. At this moment, on the auction platform, Pu Lanji withdrew a fist-sized ore that revealed an illusory sky-green color. Its surface was naturally suffused with numerous silver Dao markings, and it was suffused with strands of a chilly sheen that seemed like the stars. Heavenly Cyan Spirit Stone, condensing 72 Taoist patterns, is a first-class divine material for refining the life holy weapon. The starting price is 400,000 Taoist gems, and each bid increase shall be no less than 50,000 Taoist gems. Pu Lanji said, "This price is too high." Someone shook his head. Many people echoed. Different from ordinary holy treasures, the life holy weapon was extremely rare. Only some ancient orthodoxies inherited the secret method of sacrificial refining the life holy weapon. Moreover, even if one mastered the sacrificial refining method, it was extremely difficult to sacrificial refine it. It needed opportunities and opportunities to make the life holy weapon transform again and again. Although the heavenly Cyan Spirit Stone was precious, it was just a kind of divine material. Ordinary practitioners were really unwilling to spend a lot of money to buy this thing. However, there was no shortage of rich bigwigs at this auction, and soon someone made a bid. 450,000 Taoist gems. 500,000, 550,000. But the voice of bidding seemed to be sparse, and when the price soared to 800,000 Taoist gems, no one bid anymore. Seeing that the treasure was about to be auctioned, Lin Sun finally said, 850,000. Humph. The previous bidder was also a practitioner sitting in the elegant room. His voice was rough and vigorous. Seeing that Lin Sun intervened at the last moment, he immediately showed his dissatisfaction. 900,000. The man made another bid. Lin Sun did not hesitate. 1 million. He directly increased the price by 100,000 Taoist gems. There was a sudden sound of gasping in the auction house. Unexpectedly, a piece of heavenly Cyan Spirit Stone directly cost 1 million Taoist gems, which was simply extravagant. It should be known that 1 million Taoist gems could buy a top holy treasure. "Friend, do you really want to compete with me?" That rough and vigorous voice was filled with anger. "It's just a bidding. If you can't afford to play, then give it up. If you can afford to play, then continue. I will accompany you to the end," Lin Sun said indifferently. In the auction house, the practitioners were speechless. Was it necessary to get angry just for a piece of heavenly Cyan Spirit Stone? Haha, can't afford to play. Since I started cultivating, no one has ever dared to talk to me like this. If you want to play, I will accompany you. The rough voice laughed angrily. 2 million. There was a stir in the auction house. Pu Lanji, who was standing on the auction stage, slightly raised the corner of her mouth. At the auction, she liked this kind of guest the most. Whether it was for the sake of face or impulsiveness, she would definitely bid a very high price. Child, this price is already very outrageous. It's far from worth it. In the quiet room, Jin Tian Xianyue also reminded Lin Sun. She was very surprised before. She couldn't imagine why Lin Sun would fight so hard for a piece of divine material. However, Lin Sun smiled and said, "Just watch." Then, he continued to bid, 5 million. The light words made the whole auction house fall into a dead silence. All the practitioners were in a trance, and almost suspected that they had heard wrong. Was this crazy? 5 million Taoist gems was an astronomical figure for ordinary people of the saint realm. Even a saint king would not be able to take out so many Taoist gems at once. But now, just for a piece of divine material, he threw out 5 million. This was simply crazy and made people feel dizzy. Chapter 1945. In another elegant room, a dignified old man in a red robe had a gloomy face. Bang! He smashed the table in front of him with a slap. His whole body emitted terrible raging flames, and his divine awareness swept out. Unfortunately, the elegant room where Lin was located was isolated by the power of restriction, so his divine awareness couldn't explore at all. Who the bastard is? How dare he rob my treasure? The old man in a red robe looked gloomy. A group of men and women clustered around him, and all of them went silent like cicadas in the winter, and were surprised and bewildered. The old man in a red robe was called Shang Song, and he had an extremely famous title in Green Province, Flame Ancestor. A famous Taoist tattoo grandmaster was respected wherever he went. The men and women around him were all disciples of Flame Ancestor. Ancestor, it's just a piece of heavenly azure mysterious spirit stone. No matter how precious it is, it's not worth such a high price. Don't be angry and hurt your health. A woman comforted him softly. You know nothing. Flame Ancestor gnashed his teeth, and his eyes were gloomy and terrible. With my years of experience in refining treasures, this treasure is far from as simple as you see. Only then did those men and women understand why Flame Ancestor was so desperate. 8 million. Suddenly, Flame Ancestor made another bid, which made his heart bleed. In the auction house, the atmosphere became more and more silent. At this moment, countless cultivators were shocked. 5 million was already driving them mad, yet now, the bidding price had actually risen to 8 million in an instant. No one had expected that a piece of rare but relatively unpopular divine material would be auctioned off for such a jaw-dropping price. This was also the highest bid for a treasure up to this point in the auction. Is this divine material unusual? Check it carefully. Within a few quiet rooms, a few great figures that came from Green Province were alarmed as well. They realized that the situation wasn't right, and that there might be other mysteries behind this. They also began to pay attention to this divine material again. On the auction stage, Pu Lanji was also suspicious. She was clear about the origin of this heavenly azure mysterious spirit stone, and many appraisers had appraised it together, but they didn't find anything worth paying attention to. According to her estimation, it would be a great profit if this divine material could be sold at 800,000, but the current situation was completely beyond her expectation. For a time, the atmosphere in the auction hall became heavy and strange. But no matter how those great figures searched, they weren't able to notice anything unusual, and they couldn't help but feel slightly uncertain. Was the bidding this time because there was something special about this divine material, or was it merely a battle of personal feelings? Lin Sun seemed to be unaware of this and quoted again, 2 million. These 3 words were like a clap of thunder that caused a stir and an uproar. Who is sitting in the quiet room? 2 million myriad Tao crystals. How many extraordinary saint treasures can you buy with this? He's inhumane. At this moment, the flame ancestor was already furious to the point the veins on his forehead bulged, and smoke billowed from his 7 apertures. 2,000,000 Tao crystals. Of course he could afford it, but if he were to pay such a high price now, he would definitely be strapped for cash in the auction later. In the end, the flame patriarch gritted his teeth and gave up bidding. He ordered, "All of you, go out now and investigate the identity of the person in that quiet room. Since he dares to go against me, I'll make him suffer the consequences after the auction ends." His voice was filled with killing intent. In the end, this piece of heavenly azure mysterious spirit stone was bought at the sky-high price of 2,000,000 Tao crystals, and it was soon sent to the elegant room where Lin Sun was. After paying the Tao crystals, Lin Sun held the treasure in his hand, and a strange look appeared in his eyes. This treasure was really strange. The fist-sized ore revealed an illusory sky-green color. Its surface naturally contained 72 silver-colored Tao markings, and it was suffused with strands of a chilly glow that seemed like the starry sky. Jintian Xianhua looked at it on one side, but it didn't seem to be anything special. But at this time, in Lin Sun's body, the broken blade had long been ready to move, showing signs of desire, restlessness, and urgency. All of this was because of this heavenly azure mysterious spirit stone. "Miss Xianhua, I'm going to do one thing now. Please protect me." As he said, Lin Sun raised his hand and made a gesture. Buzz. A dense and obscure Taoist restriction interweaved in the void, covering Lin Sun. What a wonderful attainment in Tao pattern! Jintian Xuanyue's clear eyes were filled with amazement, but soon she was a little disappointed. Obviously, he didn't want her to see what he was going to do next with the formation to cover the surroundings. "Exactly when will you completely believe me?" A trace of disappointment appeared in her eyes that were as clear as the stars. Lin Sun didn't care about this. The reason why he did this was not to guard against Jintian Xianhua, but that once the treasure, the broken blade, was exposed, Jintian Xianhua might see through his identity. It should be known that in the Kunlun ruins, he killed countless opponents, and the treasures he used were also well known. Swish! The broken blade swept out like a wolf that had been hungry for countless years. It suddenly released a blazing light, covering the heavenly azure mysterious spirit stone in Lin Sun's hand. Puff, 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 with a burst of dense cracking sounds, the fist-sized heavenly azure mysterious spirit stone was broken, and the debris fell down. If the flame ancestor saw this scene, he would die of heartache. Those debris were the essence, the key to refining the life saint weapon. But now, the broken blade seemed to be not interested in it at all. Before long, as the debris peeled off, a pigeon egg-sized, cyan, pure spiritual bead was exposed. Clatter endless cyan light spread from the bead. In a trance, Lin Sun seemed to see a cyan sea, which was surging with thick, pure, and vast vitality. The vitality was so strong that Lin Sun felt suffocated. A kind of divine object recorded in the Book of Herbs in heaven came to his mind. The green spirit Tao source, born at the beginning of chaos, is like the embryo of the world. It contains vitality, the essence of all things, and the beginning of origin. In short, the green spirit Tao source was a congenital vitality at the beginning of a world, like the yolk in the eggshell, the source of life. According to the Book of Herbs in heaven, there were many kinds of such congenital Tao source, which were roughly divided into 5 elements, yin and yang, wind and thunder, and other primitive attributes. The green spirit Tao source was one of them. Thinking of this, Lin Sun couldn't help but gasp. What a great prophet! Even he didn't expect that there was such a green spirit Tao source in a piece of heavenly azure mysterious stone. Its value couldn't be measured by the number of Taoist gems, because it was so rare that it could only be found by chance. No matter which practitioner got it, no one would sell it. Clatter, the broken blade glowed, crazily absorbing the power of the green spirit Tao source. Visible to the naked eye, The surface of the broken blade was once again covered with golden dragon-like natal Taoist patterns. In Kunlun ruins, the broken blade had already produced 54 natal Taoist patterns after absorbing a lot of treasure refining Taoist qi. But now, the number of natal Taoist patterns was constantly increasing. With every additional one, the aura of the broken blade became stronger, and the snow-white light it emitted became more and more illusory and dazzling. In the end, Lin Sun felt a stabbing pain in his eyes and mind. The nearby void seemed to be unable to bear it. It was torn into countless cracks like a piece of cloth, making a deafening explosion. If Lin Sun hadn't covered it with the power of prohibition in advance, such a strange phenomenon would have destroyed all the furnishings in the elegant room. 89, 90, 91 Lin Sun stared at the changes of the broken blade, and his heart became hot. The holy treasures in the world were roughly divided into two categories. One was the ordinary holy treasure, and the other was the natal holy weapon. Ordinary holy treasures were very common. Most people in the saint realm would more or less possess such holy treasures. The power was related to the quality of the holy treasure itself. As for the natal holy weapon, it was very particular. Not only was it rare, but it was also extremely difficult to refine. It required opportunity and opportunity. Generally speaking, the power of the natal holy weapon was far more powerful than ordinary holy treasures of the same grade. Moreover, it could perfectly release all the potential of the cultivator. This was something that other holy treasures couldn't compare with. The core was that the natal holy weapon had a natal treasure pattern. When a life-treasured mark was condensed, its might would undergo a qualitative transformation, and its might would undergo a tremendous change. When 100 natal treasure patterns were condensed, the combat strength of the natal holy weapon would transform to a new height, and it would begin to give birth to the fetus of the weapon spirit, which could double the combat strength of the cultivator. This was actually very similar to the cultivation of cultivators. However, the advancement of the natal holy weapon was based on the grade of the natal treasure pattern. The final goal was to condense the weapon spirit. The weapon spirit already had wisdom, state of mind, cultivation, and combat strength. It was almost no different from a real cultivator. However, the weapon spirit was so rare that it was extremely difficult to nurture one among thousands of natal holy weapons. But as long as there was a weapon spirit, the power released in the battle was absolutely beyond imagination. For example, the weapon spirit of the insignificant Bao was called Wu Quebec. When he was in the Sunset Tang Valley, he killed the King of Saints as easily as killing a chicken. According to Wu Kei, Phylon, which was transformed by the Bloody Moth, was also a weapon spirit called the Chaos Bell of the Great Way. And Phylon was looking for an opportunity to prove itself as an emperor. At present, with the rapid transformation of the broken sword, the number of its natal treasure patterns had begun to approach 100. But to Lin Sun's surprise, when the number of natal treasure patterns of the broken sword reached 99, it couldn't be increased any more. At this time, the power of the green spirit Tao source was almost exhausted, which made Lin Sun a little anxious. Crack! Before long, the bead formed by the green spirit Tao source completely shattered and turned into flying ash. At this time, on the top of the broken sword, a vague natal treasure pattern condensed little by little, but it was extremely illusory and faint. But even so, at this moment, Lin Sun's mind trembled. With a bang in his mind, a shocking picture emerged. In the boundless darkness, a pair of eyes suddenly opened. Chapter 1946. The darkness was boundless, as if it was going to drown them. It was suffocating. The pair of opened eyes became the brightest light in the darkness, like a pair of burning suns. The gaze was extremely sharp, like a sword edge that could tear apart the void and break the ninth heaven. The moment he was stared at, Lin Sun felt cold all over as if he had fallen into an ice cave. His pores all stood on end. Immediately, the pair of eyes were closed. Lin Sun's field of vision was covered by darkness again. At this time, Lin Sun vaguely saw a figure. Ji sat in the darkness with his hair disheveled. Chains as thick as a thumb were wrapped around his throat, feet, legs, and waist, flowing with obscure ripples of order. The picture was so blurred that Lin Sun couldn't tell whether it was a man or a woman, a human or a ghost. But this figure sitting alone in the darkness gave Lin Sun an unimaginably terrifying feeling. He was like a god in the darkness who could destroy the world with a single thought. This reminded Lin of the Sky demonic emperor who was suppressed in the Tower of Endless Way. When he first met the demon king in the godlock Sky Peak, he was also bound and suppressed by the chains of Tao. After countless years, he was unable to break free from the shackles. However, different from the demon king, this lonely figure sitting alone in the darkness had a kind of extreme calmness and indifference. It was not like being suppressed, but like being trapped in a cocoon of his own making. If you want to completely refine my power, you are far from being able to do it with your current strength. Come back later. A voice sounded in Lin Sun's heart. It was as sharp as a sharp blade stabbing into his heart, with a trace of disappointment in the indifference. Boom. The next moment, all kinds of pictures in Lin Sun's mind disappeared. His entire body was drenched in sweat. Looking at the broken sword, it had become dull, without the bright and illusory light. Instead, it gave people a feeling of simplicity and simplicity. On its surface, the original 100 golden dragon-like natal patterns, as well as the 3 Taoist patterns of Yuan, Ji, and Punish disappeared. From afar, it looked like an ordinary broken sword. But Lin Sun, who was telepathically connected with Duan Ren, knew that Duan Ren had completely transformed. His fierce qi had been condensed to the extreme and restrained. That figure sitting in the darkness must be the weapon spirit of the broken blade. Ahu was right, the broken blade isn't broken, but its power has been sealed. Recalling what he had just seen, Lin Sun was enlightened. Normally, a natal saint weapon would give birth to an artifact spirit embryo after condensing 100 natal Dao runes. If he continued to temper it in the future, he would be able to condense a true artifact spirit. But now, the broken sword didn't have such a transformation. Instead, Lin Sun saw the mysterious figure sitting in the dark. Back then in the Kunlun ruins, Ahu once said that this treasure is incomplete, and only a blade is left. The tip of the blade was originally the core, but it has disappeared. Even so, it still possesses such an unbelievable and miraculous aura. One can imagine that if this treasure is complete, it will definitely be extraordinary. And the strangest thing is that this treasure is obviously broken, but it gives me a sense of perfection. Finally, Ahu made a deduction. I suspect that this treasure has long since transformed into an artifact spirit, but for some reason, this treasure's destiny treasured mark has always been sealed. Only by absorbing the power of the treasure refining Dao Qi can those sealed destiny treasured marks be unsealed one by one. Thinking about it now, Lin Sun was finally sure that what Ahu said was true. Duan Ren was not broken at all, but it had been sealed. It turns out that I've never been strong enough to see through the real secret of Duan Ren. Lin Sun remembered the words of the figure sitting in the dark and realized that if he wanted to show the complete form of Duan Ren, he must have enough strength. Only in this way could he break the seal of Duan Ren and refine its power for his own use. But even so, Lin Sun was quite shocked by the transformation of Duan Ren. According to his deduction, the power of this treasure was more than twice as strong as before. If he fought with it, he could exert twice as much combat power. This was a heaven-defying change. Lin Sun could easily suppress Jintian Xianyue, an enlightened Buddha, with his current strength. How powerful would he be if he exerted twice as much combat power? However, the only drawback was that he could only exert twice as much combat power when fighting with Duan Ren. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. I didn't expect that I would get such a great opportunity in this auction. Thinking of this, Lin Sun smiled. Clatter, putting away the Duanren, Lin Sun removed the restriction around him. Did you get anything? Jintian Xianyue asked curiously. Lin Sun was in a good mood and said with a smile, Yes, it's worth it. It was indeed worth it. 2,000,000 Tao gems in exchange for a great change of Duanren, which was completely beyond Lin Sun's imagination. What about you? Will you buy that piece of star-scale dark iron? Lin Sun asked. Yes, I will. Jintian Xianyue also showed a touch of joy. Although the price is a little higher in the auction, with this thing, the power of my life saint sword can be improved to a higher level. Lin Sun nodded. The auction continued. Rare treasures were revealed one after another, triggering round after round of intense bidding. The 33rd treasure, Space Boundary Crystal. I won't explain the magical effect of this treasure. The base price is 500,000 Tao gems, and each increase must be no less than 100,000. After waiting for a long time, with Pu Longji's words, the space boundary crystal that Lin Sun was determined to get finally appeared on the auction stage. At the same time, the whole audience was in an uproar. Especially those big shots sitting in the elegant rooms, many of whom were at the Saint King realm, were also determined to get this treasure. When the bidding began, a series of bids followed. 600,000, 800,000, 1,000,000. The hot and fierce atmosphere made many practitioners in the field speechless. Ordinary people like them had no confidence to participate in such a bidding. In the end, the bidding became a competition between a group of big shot. According to Jintian Xuanyue's analysis, this thumb-sized space boundary crystal was worth more than 1,000,000 Tao gems at most. But judging from the fierce competition, this treasure would probably be sold at a sky-high price. 2,000,000. Lin Sun also participated. With the space boundary crystal, he could further improve his control of the law of space, and it would be of great help to him in condensing the Tao field. How could he miss it? Moreover, he didn't lack Tao gems at all. It's that guy again. Some practitioners recognized Lin Sun from the voice. He was the one who had just bid for the heavenly azure spirit stone. For a moment, they couldn't help sighing with emotion. Being rich and imposing was nothing more than this. Bastard! At the same time, in another quiet room, Flame Ancestor was so angry that smoke came out of his nostrils. He also participated in the bidding for the space boundary crystal and was determined to get it. But he didn't expect to meet Lin Sun again this time. 3,000,000. Soon, the bidding had soared to an exaggerated number, and some big shots gave up directly. Although the space boundary crystal was precious and made people jealous, it wasn't a treasure that could only be found by chance. 3,000,000 Tao gems was far from cost-effective. And this price was made by Lin Sun. Who is this? It seems to be a man and a woman sitting in that elegant room. It must be a big shot with an extraordinary background. Ordinary people don't have the confidence to participate in such a bidding. Lin Sun's manner of spending money like dirt attracted the attention of many practitioners. No one believed that Lin Sun was an ordinary person. It was impossible for an ordinary person to have so many Tao gems. 3,100,000. Flame Ancestor's voice seemed to come out from between his teeth. His expression was terrifyingly gloomy. He suspected that Lin Sun was deliberately targeting him. 3,500,000. Lin Sun was determined to get this treasure, but he was also a little dissatisfied. Although he didn't know the identity of Flame Ancestor, he had been bitten by him twice in a row, which forced him to spend an extremely high price to bid for the treasure. This loss was not a small amount. Damn it! Flame Ancestor was completely enraged. His heart was boiling with killing intent, and he no longer bid. Others also stopped bidding. 3,500,000 Tao gems were already 3 times the real value of this space boundary crystal. After this round of bidding, all the cultivators in the auction had noticed Lin Sun's existence, but no one knew his origins. Fortunately, Lin Sun was sitting in an elegant room. Otherwise, he would be targeted by many people. As the saying goes, don't show your wealth. Among the practitioners present, there were many bold and ruthless people. I hope it's worth it. When the space boundary crystal was delivered, Lin Sun looked at it for a while and then put it away. He didn't rush to refine it. Child, don't you think it's a great loss? Jintian Xianyue couldn't help asking. She was also frightened by Lin Sun's repeated bids. Even if she was a direct descendant of the Jintian clan, an imperial family, and had a strong family background, it was absolutely impossible for her to spend 3,500,000 Tao gems to buy a treasure that was obviously not cost-effective. But Lin Sun didn't seem to care about the Tao gems at all. The Tao gems can be earned again, but treasures like the space boundary crystal are not so good. Lin Sun said casually and then stood up. Let's go. Go? Jintian Xianyue was stunned. Child, the divine material from the unknown place hasn't been auctioned yet. Are you leaving now? It's just an unknown thing. It's not worth wasting time. Lin Sun said. What's more, if we leave at that time, believe it or not, when we walk out of the Donglai Treasure Pavilion, we will be targeted by many people. Jintian Xianyue suddenly understood. In the auction, it was one thing to bid for the treasure, but whether one had enough strength to keep the treasure was another thing. In the starry sky, no matter where the auction was, there would often be some killings and robberies after the end of the auction. Lin Sun was not afraid of trouble, and he didn't want trouble to find him. At this time, leaving in advance was undoubtedly the wisest choice. Chapter 1947. Old Ancestor, I've found out that a man and a woman were in that VIP room, and they've left. A man reported hurriedly. Flame Ancestor frowned, and his killing intent surged. This adulterous couple is smart, but it's impossible for them to leave just like that. Old Ancestor, other brothers have been watching them in secret. The man said quickly. Okay, let's go too. Flame Ancestor took a deep breath, made a decision, and turned to leave the quiet room. Almost at the same time, in other VIP rooms of the auction house, some big shots received the news one after another. Elder, should we stop them? Master, I don't know the man and the woman. I can't identify them. Uncle, there are many people who have their eyes on that man and woman this time. Should we follow them? In the end, these big shots in the VIP rooms almost unanimously made similar decisions. Follow them, find out their background, and act according to the circumstances. The atmosphere in the auction house was still noisy and lively. Most cultivators didn't notice that with the departure of Lin Sun and Jintian Xianyue, there was also a surging tide in the dark. On the auction stage, Pu Lanji sighed in her heart when she heard the news. This kind of thing was going to happen again, and she only hoped that the man and the woman could leave safely. After calming down, Pu Lanji stopped thinking about it and said, Next, the 36th treasure, outside Donglai Treasure Pavilion. As soon as he walked out, Lin Sun instantly noticed that there were many eyes secretly watching him in the nearby area. At the same time, not far behind him, there were also cultivators following his footsteps. Child, it seems that many people are watching us this time. Jintian Xianyue whispered to Lin Sun, and an imperceptible killing intent flashed in her eyes. Although she was a Tao attendant now, don't forget that she was also a peerless talent ranked 49th on the All Heavens King Sage list. Even among her peers in the Hong Meng world, she could be regarded as a top existence. Well, let's go. Lin Sun calmly walked towards the distant city gate with his hands clasped behind his back. Along the way, he and Jintian Xianyue didn't move at full speed, as if they didn't notice the eyes watching them in the dark. Patriarch Yu Xian and his female companion have left the Donglai Treasure Pavilion, and they're heading towards the city gate. They seem to intend to leave. The Xing clan's patriarch, Xing Lushui, was the first to receive the news. Young master, should we take action? Xing Lushui hurriedly consulted Kong Yu. Nonsense. Let's go. Kong Yu stood up and strode out. Behind him, a group of cultivators from the Emperor Kong clan and the primitive Dao court followed. He had been waiting for several days and could not wait any longer. Xing Lushui didn't dare to be negligent. He summoned all the important figures in the clan to act together. For a time, undercurrents were surging in Linen City, and a storm was brewing. Underground black market. The dwarf elder appeared out of thin air in front of the Black Palace. He bowed his head and said respectfully, "Miss, I just received news that Yu Xian and his female companion are leaving Linen City." A feminine and unique voice came from the Black Palace. According to the information from the Wind Whisper Pavilion, Yu Xian will probably encounter extremely great danger when he leaves this time. On the surface, the known powers include the heir of the primordial Dao court, Kong Yu's group, and the patriarch of the Xing clan, Xing Lushui. The dwarf elder spoke swiftly. Besides that, the experts of some great powers in the Azure Prefecture have their eyes on Yu Xian and his female companion from the shadows. It's understandable for Xing Lushui to cooperate with Kong Yu. But what about those great figures in the Azure Prefecture? Within the Black Palace, the Qing Ying's snow-white hand held a crimson-colored spear, and she was wiping the sharp tip of the spear. Yu Xian's performance in the auction was slightly conspicuous. He successively spent an unimaginably high price to bid for 2 treasures, and that's why he caused so much trouble. The dwarf elder answered truthfully. Even though he wasn't present, he knew everything that had occurred during the auction like the back of his hand. So that's how it is. At the bottom of it all, it's none other than men die in pursuit of wealth, and birds die in pursuit of food. The Qing Ying's voice carried ridicule and disdain. Things in the world had always been like this. It had happened since ancient times, and it was not uncommon. The door of the Black Palace opened, and the Qing Ying, dressed in a cyan dress and holding a blood umbrella, walked out like a wisp of smoke. She looked into the distance and said indifferently, "I'm leaving. Before I leave, I want to make another deal with child Yu Xian." Outside the city, the sky was high and the clouds were wide. In the far distance, there were boundless mountains, exuding a desolate and primitive atmosphere. Lin Sun and Jintian Xianwei didn't encounter any obstacles along the way, and they smoothly walked out of the city gate. Not far away there was an ancient transmission formation. Such a transmission formation could be found in every city in the Azure Prefecture, and it would be opened every 2 hours. Every time, hundreds of practitioners could be teleported, but the cost of using the transmission formation was extremely high. At least 100,000 Tao gems were needed. If one wanted to go to some distant cities, he would even need to teleport many times, which would cost an immeasurable number of Tao gems. Therefore, under normal circumstances, if there was no emergency, no one would choose to travel by the ancient transmission formation. But it was different from the past. Today there was no bustle and noise outside the city, and it seemed very quiet. The ancient teleportation formation had been sealed. Even though there was no one guarding it, no one could activate it. The reason was very simple. To activate the transmission formation, a special formation plate was usually in the hands of the most powerful force in each city. In Linen City, the formation plate was in the hands of the Xing family. Seeing this scene, Lin Sun slightly raised the corner of his mouth and said, "It seems that the Xing family is also involved. I'm very curious about what they are planning and why they target me." Jintian Xianyue was also puzzled. Since they entered the city, they had never provoked the Xing family. "Taoism fellows, please wait a moment." Suddenly, a group of figures rushed from the direction of the city gate, led by a handsome man in a gorgeous robe, exuding a frightening aura. "What's the matter?" Lin Sun's eyes were deep, as if he was thinking about something. "We are from the demon-subduing temple in the Azure province. We would like to invite you to be our guest." The handsome man's eyes flickered. "We are neither relatives nor friends. Why should we go to your sect as guests?" Lin Sun couldn't help laughing. This reason was so lame. The handsome man said in a low voice. Taoism fellows, you should have noticed that many people have been targeting you along the way. We don't want to see you in trouble, so we specially come to invite you to be our guests. In this way, maybe you can avoid danger. Lin Sun's eyes became cold. Listen to my advice. Put away your inner greed and disappear from my sight. Otherwise, I'm afraid you won't know how you die. The faces of the handsome man and his companions became gloomy. Lin Sun didn't pay attention to them anymore. He flew away with Jintian Xianyue. Taoism fellows, you refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit? The handsome man shouted. Jintian Xianyue suddenly turned around and cut out a dazzling sword qi with his finger. Boom! Space exploded into pieces as peerless sword qi descended, and it tore open an enormous and immeasurably deep chasm before the handsome man and the others, causing dust to suffuse the air. The handsome man and his companions' hands and feet were cold, and their faces were pale. They didn't have time to react just now. If this sword had fallen on them, they probably wouldn't have been able to block it. At the thought of this, they couldn't help but tremble all over. At this time, Jintian Xianyue had already turned around and followed Lin Sun. That tall and graceful figure was filled with a fierce and mysterious color in the eyes of those people. In the nearby area, many people secretly noticed this scene. They couldn't help but turn pale and gasp. They finally realized that this man and woman were not easy to deal with. A bunch of idiots. How can trash like you deal with you, Xian? You really overestimate yourself. You must be tired of living. A sneer rang out. Kong Yu and his companions appeared in a grand formation. There were dozens of people. Among them, there were more than 10 peak-level holy kings and 2 quasi-emperor realm cultivators. For example, Xing Lushui, the patriarch of the Xing clan, was also a peak-level holy king. But at this time, he was completely following Kong Yu's lead. Seeing this scene, some of the experts who had followed them out of the Donglai treasure pavilion were so shocked that their eyeballs almost fell out. What a terrifying formation! Chase them. Kong Yu couldn't be bothered to pay attention to those people. His eyes were filled with bone-chilling hatred, and he was about to lose control of his boiling, killing intent. Rumble! The void shook. The group of people moved through the void. Divine rays of light flowed like rain, and the scene was extremely shocking. Heavens, who exactly is that Yu Xian? How did he provoke such a killing disaster? The cultivators who were following Lin Sun were all dumbfounded, and their minds were shaken. Lin and City was only a port city in Qingzhou. Usually, it was impossible to see so many terrifying figures, especially when there were 2 quasi-emperors among them. He's called Yu Xian? That damn thing! How did he provoke such a big trouble? The Flame Ancestor also appeared with a group of men and women. When he noticed the actions of Kong Yu and his companions, his expression became gloomy. Ancestor, I'm afraid we don't have a chance. A man swallowed his saliva with great difficulty. He was frightened by this scene. The others were also nervous. You guys stay here. I'll go take a look. The Flame Ancestor took a deep breath and gritted his teeth. Even if I don't want to fish in troubled waters, at least I want to see how this bastard is killed. As he spoke, his figure flashed and he broke through the air. At the same time, near the city gate, there were also some big shots who were confident of their skills. Like the Flame Ancestor, they quietly chased after them. Yu Xian. An extremely unfamiliar name. At least in this Qingzhou they had never heard of such a person. But now, because of his appearance, such a shocking pursuit was triggered. This made everyone realize that Yu Xian's origin was probably not simple. They're coming. At the same time, in the vast mountains far away from Lin and City, on the top of a mountain. Chapter 1948. The surroundings were vast and boundless, filled with mountain ranges. As the void tumbled violently, the figures of Kong Yu, Xing Lushui, and the others appeared one after another. There were dozens of them, creating a great momentum. a group of peerless saint kings and 2 quasi-emperors. How terrifying was the aura they exuded! Rumble! This part of the world wailed and shook. Grass, trees, and rocks turned into ashes. It's you. When he saw Kong Yu, Lin Sun revealed a look of understanding. It seems that Sword Emperor Fufeng spared your life last time was obviously a mistake. At the mention of Sword Emperor Fufeng, Kong Yu's face darkened and his eyes were full of hatred. Yu Xian, without the protection of Sword Emperor Fufeng, what are you? Xing Lushui and the other big shots of the Xing clan all looked unnatural. They didn't know that the target they were going to kill this time had an emperor-level figure behind him. You hold off the others later. I'll deal with the 2 quasi-emperors, Lin Sun said quickly. Jintian Xuanyue's heart tightened. There were more than one quasi-emperor. The disparity in strength was so great that she felt it was extremely tricky. I also have secret treasures in my hands that can protect us, Jintian Xuanyue said. They're just 2 excellent whetstones. It's not easy to come across them. How can I miss them? A cold light flashed in Lin Sun's black eyes, and his fighting spirit surged. Jintian Xuanyue felt a little strange when she mentioned the word whetstone. When she first met Lin Sun, she also said that she regarded Lin Sun as a whetstone, but she was defeated in the end. Do it! Kong Yu shouted. He didn't want to talk nonsense anymore. Whoosh! Behind Kong Yu, 2 figures took the lead to attack. One was a gray-haired, cold-looking man on an ancient sword. His eyes were as sharp as a sword, and his whole body was like a long sword cutting through the sky. The other was a woman holding a silver steel whip. She was beautiful and her body was curvy. She was extremely hot and attractive, but her aura was as violent as fire and murderous as the wind, making people shudder. The former was called Kong Yin, and the latter was called Chu Rao. They were both quasi-emperors. Clang! The ancient sword, as sharp as a rainbow, cut through the void and chopped at Lin Sun. Kong Yin revealed world-shocking might as soon as he attacked. The might of this sword enveloped this expanse of the heavens and the earth, causing boundless sword chi to surge while the scene of snow fluttering and ice covering an area of 5,000 kilometers appeared. At the same time, Chu Ji flicked his wrist. Puff! The 30-meter-long steel whip rose up like a silver snake, shining with a dazzling brilliance. It manifested the mysterious power of the laws and slashed down at Jintian Xuanyue. When looked at from afar, it was like the war whip of the gods in the heavens, and it seemed as if it wanted to shatter the world. Kong Yu and the others stayed far away. The main force of the attack this time was these 2 quasi-emperors, and they were just there to support them. Even though Kong Yu hated Lin Sun to the extreme, he was very clear that since Lin Sun was able to kill all the experts of the primitive Dao court by his side on the rocking boat, Lin Sun's own combat strength was bound to be extraordinary. Xing Lushui and the others heaved a sigh of relief. It was good that they didn't have to do anything. At least they didn't have to offend an Emperor Realm expert. Whoosh! Almost immediately Lin Sun also moved. The broken blade, which had become completely dull and looked extremely ordinary, suddenly swept out and blocked the Taoist sword that was coming at him. And he flashed in the air and punched the steel whip that was charging at Jintian Xuanyue. Clang! First, the broken blade and the sword collided, resulting in a deafening collision. Divine light splashed everywhere, and a fierce and terrifying aura spread, causing the nearby mountains to collapse. Bang! Then, Lin Sun's fist force, like a giant cauldron, collided with the steel whip. For a moment, Lin Sun's figure shook violently, as if he had been struck by lightning. But at the same time, the killing power of the steel whip was neutralized. Kong Yin and Chu Rao both showed a hint of surprise. A Peak Saint King was actually able to block both of their attacks. Kong Yu, Xing Lushui and the others were also stunned and gasped when they saw this scene. How could this guy be so fierce? Clang! Jintian Xuanyue took out a snow-white Taoist sword and took advantage of this opportunity to kill Kong Yu and the others. Her figure was like a dream, and her fighting methods were swift and fierce. Like a female sword fairy, she was graceful and her sword intent soared to the ninth heaven. As soon as she attacked, she displayed her most powerful means. Suddenly, a giant city in the sea of clouds appeared between heaven and earth, standing in the clouds and bathed in starlight. The city tower was like a sword that reached the sky, emitting a vast white light. Vaguely, there seemed to be an illusory figure sitting on the city tower, overlooking the heavens. Sword Realm, White Emperor City. Humph! Chu Rao, the quasi-emperor, showed a trace of displeasure. If she couldn't deal with two young people with the presence of two quasi-emperors, it would be too embarrassing. But before she could attack, Lin Sun had already broken through the air and attacked. Your opponent is me. Boom! A giant cauldron emerged, intertwined with Taoist markings and the circulation of the divine law, showing a momentum that could suppress the four extremes and judge the world. At the same time, the broken blade, like lightning, chopped at Kong Yin on the other side. A series of actions happened almost at the same time, instantly igniting this great battle. Kong Yu and the others didn't have time to watch the battle, nor did they hesitate to attack, because Jin Tianxian Yu had already arrived. Her sword realm turned into the vast White Emperor City, trying to trap and kill them. Rumble! The mountains and rivers collapsed, the towering ancient trees turned into ashes, the earth cracked, and the void was filled with blazing divine splendor and rumbling Taoist light. From a distance, it was as if gods were fighting fiercely, presenting a shocking scene of destruction and turbulence. Some of the important figures who had secretly caught up, such as the Flame Ancestor, couldn't help but tremble at this moment, and didn't dare to approach at all. Their eyes and minds were more attracted by the battle between Lin Sun and the two quasi-emperors. They didn't expect that the prey they had their eyes on this time would be a hidden great saint. Moreover, he dared to fight against two quasi-emperors at the same time. This was too shocking, and completely subverted their understanding. Clang! The broken blade and the saber and sword constantly collided, and the clanging sound of the collision shook the heavens and the earth. The nearby void collapsed and exploded, and the aura of destruction was astonishing. And Lin Sun's fist force clashed with Chu Rao's silver steel whip, producing a dull thunderous roar that shook the surroundings. The silver divine splendor and the cyan fist force raged like a hurricane. At this time, Lin Sun's expression was rare, serious and calm, and a pair of abyss-like black eyes were burning with a fierce fighting spirit. He used the green wood Taoist body, performed the 9 cauldrons world suppression scripture, and the first slash of heaven. The power circulating in his body was a combination of the battle saint technique, the everlasting leakless, and the anger of the eye. His essence, chi, spirit, and the power of the Great Way were completely performed and released by him. Indeed, as he said, this time he regarded the two quasi-emperors as whetstones. Fight! His body was glowing like the ancient blue sky, covering the sky, and his every move was disdainful and powerful. No one knew that as early as in the secret realm of Diu, on the 3rd day after becoming the great Saint King, he had already used all his strength to kill Cui Fu, a quasi-emperor of the Star Jade Sword Pavilion, the first orthodoxy of the Great Yu realm. At that time, he was in a completely suppressed state, and he was ceaselessly defeated and injured. In the end, he had to rely on the divine ability, Death Seal, to barely kill his opponent. The price he paid for this was serious injuries and dying, and he was almost exhausted. But the current Lin Sun was already different from before. His cultivation was already one step away from stepping into the Middle Saint King realm, and he had also grasped the mysteries of the embryonic form of the realm of Wei, which was terrifying and unfathomable. At the same time, after experiencing the support boat for half a year, he had not only tempered the green wood Taoist body and the yellow earth Taoist body. Even his understanding of the realm of Wei had become deeper, reaching a level that was far beyond ordinary. For example, in the battle with Golden Sky Mystic Moon and Buddhist Lord Wu Ming on the support boat, he had defeated them one by one without using his full strength. Now that he was facing quasi-emperors again, even if they were two quasi-emperors, Lin Sun was no longer afraid. Fight. He released his full strength, and although he did not use the Great Way Furnace Scripture or the Great Endless Devouring Scripture, the power was still so powerful that it made one's heart tremble. The Flame Ancestor and the others, who were watching the battle from afar, were so shocked that their hearts trembled. How was this the power of a great Saint King? It was simply heaven-defying. At the same time, Kong Yin and Chu Rao could not remain calm, and their expressions changed again and again. A quasi-emperor was above the Saint realm, and the power of the Great Way that they controlled was infinitely close to the Emperor realm. The battle strength that they possessed was naturally terrifying beyond imagination. Normally, existences like them would regard a saint as an ant and kill them like killing a chicken. Even if it was a great Saint King, they would be able to easily wipe them out. But now, when the two of them attacked together, they were actually blocked by a great Saint King, and from beginning to end, they were not at a disadvantage at all. Where did this monster come from? Kong Yin was shocked. The primordial world was the largest world in the starry sky, and it had given birth to many peerless monsters, as well as countless heaven-defying characters. But with Kong Yin's experience, he had never seen a great Saint King like Yuxian, who could cross realms to fight two quasi-emperors. Could this child be ranked in the top 10 of the All Heavens King Sage list? Otherwise, how could his battle strength be so heaven-defying? At the same time, Chu Rao could not remain calm. The battle strength that Lin Sun had displayed had overturned the understanding of the world and shattered their inherent imagination. It was simply too incredible. Brother Kong, we can't hold back anymore. Chu Rao's heart was filled with killing intent. Behind Yuxian stood the Fuyao Sword Emperor, and if she did not kill him this time, there would be endless trouble in the future. Moreover, with the heaven-defying battle strength that he had displayed, once he broke through to the great Saint King realm, which quasi-emperor in the world could be his match? At that time, it was likely that only a great emperor would be able to suppress him. Rise! Kong Yin took a deep breath and used his unique skill. A Taoist sword flashed in the void, transforming into thousands of sword shadows. 1 into 1,000. The dense sword shadows were as dense as a forest, blotting out the sky and earth. Each sword shadow flowed with sharp, violent, and turbulent sword laws. From afar, it was as if a boundless sword prison had descended upon the world. The entire world wailed as it was drowned by the terrifying sword chi, sword intent, and sword light. The Flame Ancestor and the others felt a stabbing pain in their eyes, and their minds were shaken. Their consciousness was filled with a vast expanse of white, and they could no longer see the scene of the battle. Chapter 1949. Almost at the same time, Jintian Xianyue, who was fighting fiercely with Kong Yu and others, also felt a great sense of danger in her heart. She captured the breath of Kong Yin's sword in her divine awareness. Her pretty face changed, but it was too late for her to save him. It was already her limit to fight against hundreds of thousands of peerless Saint Kings with sword domain White Emperor City alone. It happened suddenly, so it was futile to worry and worry. Kong Yu and others looked gloomy at first. Being pinned down by a single woman made them feel fearful, but at the same time, they also felt humiliated. But at this time, when they perceived the breath of Kong Yin's sword, their eyes lit up and they were shocked. What a terrible sword! This was the real power of a quasi-emperor, which was above all saints and second only to the emperor realm. Chu Rao also breathed a sigh of relief. She recognized that this was Kong Yin's trump card, called Boundless Sword Shadow, which integrated Kong Yin's cultivation of swordsmanship and honed for 8,000 years to show the style of swordsmanship. Even she could only avoid the sharpness of this sword. If he dies under this sword, it will be worth it. As soon as this thought came to Chu Rao's mind, Kong Yin's sword had already chopped down. Boom! Thousands of sword shadows rumbled, like thousands of peerless swordsmen descending upon Lin Fan with the aura of a boundless universe. The world was illuminated by the vast sword light, dazzling and boundless. The mountains and rivers within a radius of 3,000 miles were silently turned into powder at this moment, and the smoke and dust covered the sky. But Lin Sun was neither sad nor happy at this time. He just moved his mind. Clang! The dull and lusterless broken sword, as if awakened at this moment, suddenly emitted a touch of extremely bright light and flashed away. The first cut of Tianyuan. However, at this moment, the power of the attack had doubled. Doubling seemed inconspicuous, but it was equivalent to the fusion of two Lin Sun's fighting power. It was also the first time for Lin Sun to release the full power of the broken blade after absorbing the source of green spirit Tao and transforming it. Then, the broken sword flashed like a flowing light and illusory. Everywhere it passed, the dense expanse of sword chi was soundlessly crushed, and vanished. The sword chi was even more dazzling than the sun. But under the broken blade's slash, they all dimmed. It took a long time to describe, but in reality, everything had happened in an instant, and it was so fast that no one could see it clearly. Dang! Amidst a world-shaking collision, Kong Yin's Dao sword wailed and was blasted flying. Kong Yu's body trembled as he suffered a backlash. His expression suddenly changed. The boundless thousand-sword shadow was the trump card that he was most proud of. It was a supreme technique that he had refined for 8,000 years in the quasi-emperor realm. But now, it had been broken by a peerless sage king who he didn't even care about. How was this possible? Such an unexpected turn of events caught Kong Yin off guard, and his heart wavered slightly. At this time, Duan Ren had already arrived. It was unimaginably fast. It was like a wisp of light that could amaze the ages, and it tore through the darkness of eternal night as it arrived, and the aura it emanated was ferocious to the point it caused all living beings in the world to tremble. Puff! There was a flash of light. As a quasi-emperor, Kong Yin's defense was extremely strong, but in this instant, it was easily torn apart like a piece of paper. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, his stomach was split open. An incomparably ferocious and austere aura poured down like a mountain torrent, rushing into his body with a destructive force. His indestructible body of a quasi-emperor showed signs of cracking and destruction. Blood and minced flesh splattered everywhere. There was a burst of exclamations. No one had expected that the trump card of a quasi-emperor like Kong Yin would be destroyed in a head-on collision. Even more so, no one had expected that Kong Yin would be killed. Boom! Chu Rao was the first to react. She waved her silver steel whip and suddenly appeared behind Lin Sun, and the incomparably domineering steel whip ruthlessly smashed down. It was powerful and heavy, and the whip was as heavy as a mountain. Lin Sun did not dodge or evade, but went straight ahead. At this moment, he arrived in front of Kong Yin, who was seriously injured and on the verge of death, and swung his fist to kill. Duan Ren was destroying Kong Yin's body like a hot knife through butter, and Lin Sun's punch was like the convergence of the 9 cauldrons, which had the power to calm everything and cleanse the universe. Kong Yin had no time to dodge. Everything happened too quickly. Even with his many years of battle experience, he had no time to dodge, and could only face it head-on. Boom! Amidst the earth-shattering sound of the collision, Kong Yin's already seriously injured body completely exploded. The terrifying fist force and the Duan blade, which had doubled its combat power, worked together to kill the quasi-emperor on the spot. That bloody scene was truly shocking. At the same time, Lin Sun's back was smashed by the silver steel whip. His internal organs were shaken, and his spine was cracked. Bang! He staggered and flew out, coughing up blood, his face pale. At the critical moment, the Duan blade swept out, and finally blocked Chu Rao's storm-like pursuit. A series of scenes happened in the blink of an eye, and then came to an end. However, a quasi-emperor like Kong Yin had already been killed on the spot. The bloody scene caused the expressions of everyone present to change. The flame ancestor and the others were dumbfounded. They felt a bone-piercing chill run down their spines, and they could not help but tremble all over. Facing the pincer attack of two quasi-emperors, Yu Xian had still been able to kill one of them. The most incredible thing was that Yu Xian was only a peerless saint king. The whetstone is broken. Jin Tian Xuanyue's heart, which had been clenched, was also overwhelmed by extreme shock at this moment. Crossing a great realm to kill a quasi-emperor. How many people in the world could do this? Kong Yu, Xing Lushui, and the others trembled inwardly, as if they had seen a ghost. Puff! Several bloody heads fell to the ground, beheaded by a ray of pure white sword chi. It was naturally Jintian Xianyue who had attacked. Taking advantage of this opportunity, she attacked with all her strength, fierce and murderous like a banished immortal. In the vast sword domain of White Emperor City, all that was whistling was bright sword chi. Kill! Kong Yu roared. Xing Lushui and the others also realized the seriousness of the situation and attacked with all their strength. In the distance, Lin Sun and Chu Rao were fighting. One of them was dazzling like the ancient sky, performing the 9 cauldrons with immeasurable power. A Duan blade flashed, exuding an extremely fierce sharpness. The other waved a steel whip, pointing at the sky and hitting the ground. The silvery shadow of the whip produced many strange phenomena, and the power of various laws poured out like a tide. However, at this moment, Chu Rao's heart was filled with shock and anger, and her brows were full of seriousness. Kong Yin's combat strength was not weaker than hers, but when he displayed his most prized trump card, he was killed by his opponent in a spurt of energy. This bloody scene made Chu Rao's hair stand on end and she was frightened. Since becoming a quasi-emperor, this was the first time she felt a bone-chilling danger and chill in front of a peak saint king. At this time, Lin Sun took a deep breath, suppressed his injuries, and attacked with all his strength. If it had been his real body, he would not have been injured, but in order to hide his identity, Lin Sun could only make do. His mind was clear, calm, and ethereal. He performed his own Tao and techniques, and his body was as bright as the great blue sun, becoming more and more illusory. Boom! For a moment, the world was overturned and the sun and moon lost their light. Die! Chu Rao suddenly rushed forward, taking 9 steps in the air. With each step, a golden divine rainbow fell from the void. When she took the 9th step, 9 divine rainbows fell and condensed into a big golden lotus. 36 petals bloomed, and each leaf represented a universe. 36 Lotus World. This was Chu Rao's unique technique. She used her own law domain to transform into a world, divided into 36 layers, and each layer contained a different killing intent. And Chu Rao, who was in this world, was like a ruler, standing upright on the big lotus. Her body transformed into 36 worlds, and her divine power was boundless. Quasi-emperors were the ancestors of all living beings, and the laws of the great ways they controlled were above the saint realm. For example, this 36 Lotus world was transformed from the domain of Tao. Realizing that Chu Rao had begun to fight desperately, Lin Sun also took a deep breath, and a trace of determination flashed in his black eyes. Buzz! A rudimentary domain of Tao appeared around him, deep as an abyss, boiling like a furnace, and green in color, releasing the mysteries of life and death. This was the first time Lin Sun used the Greenwood Taoist body to display the rudimentary domain of Tao. Compared to the past, although the atmosphere was different, its power could be said to be mysterious and unpredictable. In an instant, a strange scene appeared in this part of the world. The 36 Lotus worlds revealed all sorts of profundities. There was auspicious light flowing, melodious Tao music, the roar of fiend gods, the rotation of the sun and moon, but when Lin Sun's rudimentary domain of Tao appeared, it was like a peerlessly overbearing and raging storm, and it crushed the Lotus worlds one after another with the momentum of a whirlwind. The auspicious light exploded and dispersed, the Tao music stopped abruptly, the fiend gods fled in terror, and the sun and moon were overturned. Lin Sun's domain of Tao was like the source of destruction, and it plundered vitality and reversed life and death. Rumble. It was utterly impossible to describe the scene at this moment. The heavens and the earth shook while a vast expanse of whiteness appeared, and it seemed as if the surrounding void had been destroyed. This battle even caused Lin, a city that was extremely far away, to be shaken. The bodies of countless cultivators that were distributed throughout the city trembled, and they felt as if an earthquake had erupted. Their expressions couldn't help but change. There were also those with extraordinary strength that stood in the void and sensed the commotion of this battle from afar, and they couldn't help but be astounded. Was this an unprecedented battle between quasi-emperors? Unfortunately, the distance was too far, and they couldn't see it clearly at all. Naturally, it was impossible for them to know that this was not a battle between quasi-emperors, but a battle that could be said to be an earth-shattering battle across realms. When the smoke and dust dispersed, the nearby mountains and rivers had turned into a scene of devastation, ravines crisscrossed everywhere, and vitality had dried up. It was a scene of destruction. Puff! In the void, Lin Sun coughed up blood. His face was pale and his clothes were torn. His hair was disheveled, and he was in a rather sorry state. But before Kong Yu and the others could breathe a sigh of relief, a scene that made them shiver all over appeared. Opposite Lin Sun, Quasi-Emperor Chu Rao, who seemed to be unscathed, seemed to have lost all her vitality in an instant. Her whole body turned into ashes that filled the sky. A gust of wind blew past, blowing away the ashes. There was dead silence, and not a single sound could be heard. A quasi-emperor had been destroyed in such a terrible way. This was something that no one had imagined before. The strange scene of her death was too horrifying. Chapter 1950. Kong Yin, who had been practicing the boundless sword Shadow for 8,000 years, was broken by Lin Sun's broken sword and crushed by his fist. His body exploded and he died suddenly. At this time, Chu Rao also followed Kong Yin's footsteps. How powerful were the 36 Lotus Realms! However, she had died under this move that she was most proud of. The vitality of her body had been stripped away, and she had transformed into ashes that filled the sky. And it was Lin Sun, a saint king, who killed her. At this moment, the world was dead silent. Jintian Xianyue, Kong Yu, and others who were fighting fiercely were all shocked and stopped what they were doing. However, while Jintian Xianyue was shocked, there was an unconcealable joy on his face, while Kong Yu and the others looked as if they had been struck by lightning, as if they had lost their parents. Two quasi-emperors could almost sweep away all the saint kings in the world when they fought together. But now, Kong Yu and Chu Rao were killed by Lin Sun one after another in a head-on confrontation. Who could be shocked? Flame Ancestor and other big shots who were watching the battle in the dark were already dumbfounded. They were so frightened that their guts were about to burst and their hearts were filled with terror. When they thought that their prey in Donglai Treasure Pavilion turned out to be such a powerful man, they felt a lingering fear. Why did you stop fighting? In the void, although Lin Sun's clothes were torn, his back was as straight as a sword. Although there were blood stains on the corners of his mouth and his face was quite pale, he still stood there with awe-inspiring power. Clang! Jintian Xianyue smiled and continued to fight with a sword sound. Go! However, Kong Yu and others were so frightened that they didn't dare to fight anymore. They chose to escape without hesitation. Especially those big shots of the Xing family, who had long been scared out of their wits and shivered. They didn't even care about Kong Yu and fled faster than the other. If I let you escape, you will still be a problem in the future. With a sigh, Lin Sun's figure flickered and suddenly disappeared. The next moment, he appeared in front of Kong Yu. Don't kill me. I'm willing to pay all the compensation, Kong Yu screamed. Puff! Before his voice died away, he was cut in half by the broken sword. His face was full of shock and fear, as if he couldn't believe it. Ever since he started cultivating, he had entered the primordial Tao court as a pure-blooded descendant of the imperial Kong family. Wherever he went, he was respected and respected. Who would have thought that there was someone in this world who didn't care about his status and killed him without any hesitation? Lin Sun was so fast that he didn't even bother to pay attention to a dead man like Kong Yu. His top priority was to seize all the time to kill all the enemies. Puff puff puff. In the following period of time, experts were killed one after another as they fled for their lives. There were experts by Kong Yu's side, and there were also important figures from the Xing clan. No matter who they were all killed by Lin Sun. With his current battle prowess, he could already kill a quasi-emperor in a head-on battle, let alone these people of the same generation. It was killing people like tearing paintings, and annihilating them like slaughtering chickens. Jin Tianxianyue originally wanted to cooperate with him, but she couldn't do anything along the way. The Flame Ancestor and others in the dark were already in a cold sweat. They had already fled in a hurry for fear of being included in Lin Sun's hunting list. In fact, Lin Sun had no energy to pay attention to these small fries at the moment. After a while, the head of the Xing clan, Xing Lushui, was moving at full speed in front of the majestic and bustling Lin An city. He was about to enter the city. Swish! A broken blade appeared in front of him. If he hadn't stopped in time, he would have bumped into it, and the consequences would have been unimaginable. Taoism Peer, this time our Xing clan is just following orders. We have no intention of being enemies with you. I hope you can show mercy and let me live. Xing Liushui's face was pale. He turned around with difficulty and begged in a trembling voice. If I am in trouble this time, will you show mercy? Lin Sun asked. Xing Lushui stiffened all over. The answer was obvious, and it would be too fake for him to deny it. Puff! The next moment, Lin Sun had already taken action. With a flash of the broken blade, Xing Lushui was killed in front of Lin An city. Then, Lin Sun turned around and left. God! The head of the Xing clan has been killed. Lin An city was originally a fairy city. People came and went outside the city gate, and this bloody scene was seen by many practitioners. For a time, there were constant exclamations and uproars. It didn't take long for the news to spread to Lin An city, causing a stir. Xing Lushui acted with the experts of the primitive Tao court. Now that he was killed outside the city gate, doesn't it mean that those experts of the primitive Tao court are also dead? Many people were shocked and gasped. At the beginning, some people noticed that Kong Yu took Xing Lushui and others out of the city in a threatening manner. But now, such a bloody thing happened, which inevitably made people's imagination run wild. Who is that man? How can he be so terrible? There were also many people who were disappointed. Xing Lushui was a saint king at the peak of the perfection realm. In Green Province, he was also a big shot who could summon wind and rain. But he was killed in front of his own nest. And when the big shots like Flame Ancestor returned, they brought back even more shocking news. Yu Xian killed 2 quasi-emperors, Kong Yu and others, and killed all the big shots of the Xing clan. Yu Xian, a young man at the peak of the Saint King realm, has the power to kill enemies across the realm. Yu Xian once appeared in Donglai Treasure Pavilion. Yu Xian, one news after another swept over Lin, unlike a storm, causing a sensation in the whole city and setting off shocking waves. Donglai Treasure Pavilion. The piece of divine material from an unknown place, which everyone had been looking forward to, was the last to appear as the final treasure. However, just as Pu Lanji was deliberating her words and planning to introduce the final treasure, there was a commotion in the auction house. What? The head of the Xing clan is dead? There are experts of the primitive Tao court involved in this matter? Yu Xian is too cruel. There was turmoil and chaos in the auction house. Countless shocked voices rang out, diluting people's expectations for the final treasure. Pu Lanji was stunned for a moment before she realized that the man and the woman whom she had thought might be in trouble had actually done something earth-shattering. This made her smile bitterly. The final treasure was originally the focus of attention, but now it was completely disrupted. Outside the city, in the vast mountains, Lin Sun and Jin Tianxianwei gathered together, as if nothing had happened, and said, "Next, let's go to Yunzhou." With a wave of his sleeve, he took out the vast universe arc and flew away with Jin Tianxianwei. "Child, these are the spoils we collected before." On the ship, Jin Tianxianwei handed a storage ring to Lin Sun, with a look of heartfelt respect. When she was defeated by Lin Sun on the ship, she was still unable to estimate Lin Sun's true strength. But now, she finally had a clear understanding. Yu Xian had already reached a height that she could only look up to in the Saint King realm. Lin Sun was keenly aware of the change in Jin Tianxuanyue's attitude, but he did not say much and began to check the storage ring. The spoils obtained from killing Kong Yu and his party were extremely rich. All kinds of divine materials, elixirs, ores, and holy treasures added up, according to the market price of the underground black market, could be worth more than 10 million Tao gems. This was the so-called, "A man cannot be rich without a windfall, and a horse cannot be fat without grass at night. When these spoils are sold, I will give you half," Lin Sun said casually. Jin Tianxianwei was stunned, and a strange light flashed in her clear eyes. She said, "Child, I am just a servant beside you. How can I share the spoils?" Lin Sun smiled. "What servant? We have fought side by side, so the spoils should be divided equally. This is my rule." Halfway through his sentence, he almost blurted out the words Lin. Jin Tianxuanyue's heart trembled inexplicably, and she felt a trace of indescribable joy. Was this a sense of identity? Lin Sun suddenly stood up and walked out of the cabin. The next moment, the vast universe arc also stopped in the void, because in the distance, there appeared a woman in a cyan dress holding a blood umbrella. She stood in the sky, surrounded by a misty sea of clouds, her clothes fluttering, and the eye-catching red umbrella made her look extremely enchanting. "Child, I came uninvited, please don't blame me." Qing Ying spoke in a soft and ethereal voice. "Miss Qing Ying, what's the matter?" Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed slightly. He had just fought with 2 quasi-emperors. Not only was he exhausted, but he was also injured. Lin Sun had to guard against the sudden appearance of Qing Ying, who exuded a mysterious aura. Even when facing this woman, Lin Sun was far more serious than facing the 2 quasi-emperors, Kong Yin and Chu Rao. "I would like to take this opportunity to make a deal with you." Qing Ying seemed to see through Lin Sun's vigilance and directly stated her intention. "I'd like to hear the details." Lin Sun was interested. "I wonder if you have heard of Lin Sun?" Qing Ying asked. At this moment, Lin Sun was keenly aware that Qing Ying's eyes were fixed on him, as if to observe his reaction. He said calmly, "Isn't he the most wanted criminal in the starry sky?" "Of course I have heard of him." Qing Ying was silent for a while and then said, "If you have a chance to see him in the future, you might as well tell him that I, Qing Ying of the Misty House, would like to meet him. At that time, I will tell him a thing that will do him no harm." Lin Sun replied with an "oh" and asked, "Lin Sun has disappeared for many years. Why do you think I can see him?" Qing Ying said, "Intuition." Lin Sun's lips twitched imperceptibly. He shook his head with a wry smile. "Well, I promise you. Thank you for your help." As Qing Ying spoke, he turned his hand and took out a translucent and fine copper mirror. "There's a map in this copper mirror. You can find me with it. If young master can accomplish this, I'll give young master a reward that you can't refuse." "Can't refuse." Lin Sun smiled playfully. Qing Ying said, "Believe it or not, what's the harm in waiting?" Lin Sun nodded happily. "Well, I also believe my intuition this time." Buzz. Qing Ying flicked her finger, and the slender copper mirror flew out and handed it to Lin Sun. Child, I look forward to meeting you next time, Qingying said and turned away. Her green dress fluttered in the sea of clouds, and the blood umbrella over her head was like a canopy, covering the sky and her face. Chapter 1951. Watching Qingying's stunning figure disappear in the vast sea of clouds, Lin Sun withdrew his eyes. Looking at the bronze mirror in his hand, he couldn't calm down. This woman seemed to notice something from him? Otherwise, why did he come to me and talk about Lin Sun, a thing related to me? Clatter, his spiritual awareness entered the bronze mirror. In an instant, a mysterious map emerged in his mind. The route drawn on it was extremely complicated, and the ultimate destination was marked with a place: the hidden land. Lin Sun put away the bronze mirror, walked into the cabin and said, "Xianyue, have you heard of the hidden land?" Jintian Xianyue frowned and thought for a while. Then she shook her head and said, "It's the first time I've heard of it." Lin Sun nodded and stopped thinking about it. When there was a chance in the future, he would go to the hidden land to have a look. He was also quite curious as to what kind of thing this Qingying was going to tell him, which would bring him no harm at all. As for the irresistible reward, Lin Sun didn't care at all. On the contrary, Qingying's attitude made him realize that what was waiting for him in the hidden land should not be a fatal disaster. "Xianyue, after today, you and I both need to change our identities. Otherwise, the journey will not be peaceful," Lin Sun said. Jintian Xianyue chuckled and took out a silver mask as thin as cicada's wing. She gently covered her face. Suddenly, her temperament and appearance changed accordingly. If it was said that she was a peerless beauty with graceful bearing and immortal physique before, then at this moment, she instead had a kind of cute and clever, delicate and pretty aura like a pretty daughter from a humble family, and her brows were clear and childish. Lin Sun was stunned. He couldn't see through the disguise on Jintian Xianyue with his spiritual awareness. "This is a treasure given by Thousand Illusion Spirit Emperor, a good friend of my ancestor. It's called All Creatures. It's the most magical," Jintian Xianyue explained. "According to Senior Thousand Illusion Spirit Emperor, there are only two types of people who can see through this disguise. One is a martial emperor, and the other is an expert who is born with an innate talent similar to the heavenly eye." Lin Sun suddenly understood. All living beings' avatar. Just from its name, one could tell how profound this mask-like treasure was. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun also changed his body, replacing the wood Taoist body with the yellow Taoist body. His aura and charm also changed accordingly. It was as heavy as a stone and as lofty as a mountain. Jintian Xianyue widened her eyes, revealing a look of shock. She sensed that Lin Sun had truly become a completely different person. His aura, charm, and even appearance were all different. This was even more miraculous than her all-living being's avatar. At the same time, a bold idea emerged in her mind. Was the previous him also in disguise? If that's the case, then who is his true identity? Jintian Xianyue already had his suspicions when they were on the support boat. According to her knowledge, the imperial clan, the Yu clan, was only an ancient imperial clan. Even though their resources and reserves were formidable, they were content with their own territory. If Yu Xian really came from the Yu clan, then with the heaven-defying battle prowess he possessed, his name would have long since spread far and wide. However, Yu Xian's name didn't even appear on the All-Heaven King list. Even the Heavenly Sound Pavilion, which was also located in the Ziheng Star Zone, didn't know how powerful Yu Xian was. Now, witnessing Lin Sun's means of transformation, how could Jintian Xianyue not be suspicious? But she was sensible enough not to ask. In fact, she didn't know at all that Lin Sun did this on purpose. As long as Jintian Xianyue was with him in the future, she would definitely find more and more clues. In this regard, Lin Sun didn't have any scruples. However, Lin Sun didn't reveal this layer. It would be better if his true identity could be concealed all the time. He thought for a moment and said, "From now on, call me Jin Di." "Jin Di?" good name. Jin is the sharpness of heaven and earth. It means that all living things in the world have their uniqueness. Jintian Xianyue praised. She herself was a descendant of the White Emperor in ancient times. Her surname was Jintian. She thought that Lin Sun's surname was inspired by her surname. The corner of Lin Sun's mouth twitched. If the narcissistic old toad knew that a fairy like Jintian Xianyue would have such a special affection for his name, he would be complacent. Xianyue, I'm going to cultivate in seclusion for a period of time, Lin Sun said in a low voice. First, he wanted to repair the injuries of the Greenwood Taoist body. Second, he wanted to take advantage of this time to completely refine the space boundary crystal. At the same time, he had another goal. If he could break through to the peak of the middle stage of the Saint King realm before he arrived at the Xuanji Dao sect in Cloud Province, that would naturally be the best. Okay, I'll protect you. Jintian Xianyue nodded. As Lin Sun and the others boarded the vast universe arc and set off for Cloud Province, the matter that shook Lin and City also spread to Green Province as if it had wings. The death of Kong Yu and the other untainted Dao court experts, as well as the death of the Xing clan, was like a storm that had an extremely great impact. It should be known that Green Province was one of the 49 provinces of the untainted world. It had tens of thousands of cities and a vast territory like a large world. But in all these years, there had never been an expert in Green Province who dared to kill the successors of the 6 great Dao courts. Similarly, the battle strength that Yu Xian had displayed was also eye-catching. In a situation where he was fighting 1 against 2, he was still able to cross a great realm and kill 2 quasi-emperors. This was simply too inconceivable. But what puzzled people was that there was no such heaven-defying and ruthless person like Yu Xian on the All Heavens Saint King list that covered the entire starry sky ancient path. On the contrary, the death of Xing Lushui and the others caused a relatively small commotion. After all, Lin and City was only one of the tens of thousands of cities in Green Province. Although the Xing clan was the number 1 force in Lin and City, it was not enough in the entire Green Province. In just a few days, the entire Green Province knew that the successors of the untainted Dao court had been killed. And the name Yu Xian was like a dark horse that had charged out of the sky. His fierce name shook the Green Province and attracted countless gazes. Soon, even his background and details were found out. For example, he came from the Yu clan, an ancient imperial family in the Diu realm. He took the Heavenly Sound Pavilion's support boat across the starry sky and arrived in the primordial world. Even the things he did on the support boat were dug out one by one. These news could not be concealed at all. After all, the cultivators who arrived in the primordial world on the support boat like him all knew about these things. In the end, this information was summed up, and the cultivators of Green Province came to an almost similar conclusion. Yu Xian, a hidden and heaven-defying figure, was protected by the Fuyao Sword Emperor of the Jintian clan. Because of a woman named Lu Qingyan, he became enemies with Kong Yu and other experts of the untainted Dao court, but in the eyes of those who were observant, there were still many mysteries about Yu Xian. For example, Wuming Buddha and his people once appeared in the Hidden Land realm, regarded him as a heretic, and wanted to get rid of him quickly. For example, Fufeng Sword Emperor also wanted to suppress him, but for some reason, his attitude changed. In short, in this Green Province, Yu Xian, who was disguised as Lin Sun, was completely famous. Being targeted by the Hidden Land realm, Yu Xian is doomed to be hunted down. Someone made an inference. Moreover, he killed the successor of the untainted Dao court. Even if he has Fufeng Sword Emperor as his backer, in this primordial world, I'm afraid he can't protect Yu Xian. Such a view received a lot of approval. For a time, a storm was brewing in the Green Province, and when these news came out from the Green Province, the most eye-catching thing was the heaven-defying combat power shown by Yu Xian. It was rare in the primordial world to cross a great realm and kill two quasi-emperors as a peerless holy king. Who could not pay attention to such a monstrous figure? It was said that when the news reached the black-yellow Taoist court, one of the 6 major Taoist courts, it even attracted the attention of some old monsters. After all, whether it was the Starry Sky True Sage list, Starry Sky Great Sage list, or All Heaven's Holy King list, they were all issued by the black-yellow Taoist court. Now, such a heaven-defying figure like Yu Xian did not appear on the All Heaven's Holy King list. For the black-yellow Taoist court, this naturally became an anomaly worthy of attention. However, the primordial world was too big, vast, and boundless. The name Yu Xian was still very strange to the vast majority of cultivators in the whole world. Strictly speaking, the fame of Yu Xian, who was disguised by Lin Sun, was only limited to the Green Province. Lin Sun was completely unaware of these disturbances and influences. Moreover, like Jintian Xianyue, he had changed his identity in advance. Even if he was seen by cultivators on the road, it was impossible to recognize him. Time flew by. 10 days later, the vast universe arc carrying Lin Sun and Jintian Xianyue, after passing through thousands of mountains and rivers and crossing many cities, finally left the territory of the Green Province. The journey was smooth and uneventful. It was also on this day that Lin Sun completely refined the space boundary crystal, and his control of the law of space soared. The thumb-sized space boundary crystal was actually not simple. It was the original power of space that was born at the beginning of the world. In addition, during the 6 months on the rocking boat, Lin Sun had been pondering and comprehending the Tao field. The refining of the space boundary crystal was like a primer, which made his control of the law of space undergo a profound transformation. Every world operated with a different law of space. For example, the law of space of the Diyu world and the primordial world was completely different. But as long as one could control the mysteries of the law of space, no matter which world one went to, one could use one's magical powers like a fish in water. For example, space teleportation, size manipulation, worlds end near. But the core was that the control of the law of space played a vital role in the condensation of the Tao field. Just like at this moment, Lin Sun's improvement in the law of space gave him a new understanding of his Tao field, and a strong premonition arose in his heart. It was not far from the day when he would completely condense a complete Tao field. Tomorrow is the 15th. Between the 15th and the 19th, you will get double the monthly ticket. This thing is only doubled if you spend vertical and horizontal coins. Everyone should act within their means. Chapter 1952. In the following period of time, Lin Sun and Jintian Xianyue didn't hurry on with their journey, and they either traveled through the boundless mountains and rivers, or wandered through the cities. It was a completely relaxed state of mind while traveling. The primordial world was extremely vast, and every single state had its own style and features. They were in a myriad of forms and were dazzling and unusual. For example, when they traveled in the Nether Province, the area of this province was a few times larger than Azure Province, and most of the cultivators within this province were Netherworld cultivators. They were famous for tempering the soul and utilizing the energy of soul essence. The Nether Province was also said to be the place in the world that was most like the Netherworld, and the cities that were distributed throughout it revealed a ghastly scene. In the eyes of mortals in the mortal world, this place was indeed very terrifying. The treasures refined and the cultivation techniques cultivated by the cultivators revealed the phenomena of being overrun with ghosts and demons. Only when they arrived at the Nether Province did Lin Sun find out that there was an unknown place called the Dark Underworld in this province, and it was regarded as a forbidden area. Even an Emperor Realm figure would have a slim chance of survival if he entered it. According to legend, the Nether God scripture of the first sect in the Nether Province, the Nether sect, came from the Dark Underworld, regardless of whether the rumor was true or not. The Dark Underworld was indeed an extremely famous unknown place, and it was called one of the 8 great forbidden areas of the primordial world. If they traveled in the Star Province, it was a completely different scene. There were numerous enormous ravines in this province, and it was even to the extent that some cities were built in the depths of these ravines. According to legend, 2 supreme figures fought fiercely here a long time ago, and with a wave of their hands, they slashed down the stars that covered the sky. When those meteors smashed into the ground, they formed huge ravines. Interestingly, these meteors contained all sorts of strange divine materials and ores, and in the countless years of the past, countless cultivators had come to search for them. Therefore, the Star Province was also called the Mineral Province, and it was abundant in various divine materials, and a large number of outstanding equipment refining grandmasters had emerged from it. All in all, Azure Province, Nether Province, Star Province, every single province was extremely vast, and they had their own culture and culture. Along the way, Lin Sun and Jin Tianxianwei widened their horizons and gained a deeper understanding of the primordial world. Along the way, the two of them spent money like it was water, buying many rare and strange specialties. For example, the ghost rhino puppets that were abundant in the Nether continent had the soul essence of azure beetles refined within them. So long as 2 cultivators held one each and utilized a unique secret technique to activate it, then no matter where they were or how far they were, they would be able to form a unique connection and sense the existence of the other. Take the clam soul pearl for example. If this pearl was buried anywhere, then no matter where one went, one would be able to observe everything that was happening in that place at all times. It was like a mirage that could be seen at any time. For example, the jade spirit pendant, that was abundant in the star region, was a small creature that was born from jade essence. It was 3 inches in size, completely snow-white, and had a pair of arms that were like little hammers. It was capable of identifying all sorts of jade treasures in the world. Other than the ghost rhino puppet, the clam soul pearl, the jade essence pendant, there were also some other rare items. For example, the flame essence, that could help a refiner control the temperature of a flame. For example, the Southern Bridge Jade Pillow, that could conjure all kinds of beautiful dreams and let cultivators immerse themselves in the dream world to experience all kinds of living beings. There were too many of them to count. In addition to killing and cultivation, the world of cultivators also gave birth to various civilizations and items, which involved all aspects of cultivation life. Because of this, the entire cultivation world became colorful, resplendent, and glorious. However, these rare things were extremely expensive. Along the way, just by buying these treasures, Lin Sun's Dao crystal flowed out like water. For example, a pair of precious ghost rhino puppet was worth 100,000 Tao gems, and the price of a Southern Bridge jade pillow was even more outrageous, costing 1.9 million Tao gems, and it was often not available. Along the way, 2 months had passed without him realizing it. On this day, Lin Sun and Jin Tianxianwei arrived in Snow Province and stopped in a city called Qianlu. As the name suggested, Snow Province was a world covered with ice and snow all year round. Mountains, rivers, and everything was covered with silver and snowflakes. The materials used to construct the city were all made of profound ice. They were sparkling, translucent, and beautiful. Child, these are all the classics about Snow Province that can be bought in the market. In an inn, Jin Tianxianwei returned with a lot of jade slip. Lin Sun took them in his hand and read them one by one. Every time he arrived at a place, he would collect the classics of this place and study the history, civilization, geography, and other knowledge of this place. Read thousands of books and travel thousands of miles. Without reading books, even if he went to visit some famous places, he would not understand the origin and illusions of these places and the meaning contained in them at all. In that case, no matter how many places he went, he would just look at the flowers on horseback and watch the fun, and it would not help his own experience. Primordial World was the first world in the starry sky and also regarded as the origin of all Tao. If he could learn all kinds of news about this world as much as possible, it would be of immeasurable benefit to Lin Sun's future cultivation. The so-called cultivation was also like this. See the world, see all living beings, see yourself. Identify all things in the world, feel the mystery of the Great Tao, appreciate all kinds of living beings, and feel the essence of the ups and downs of the world. In this way, he could prove himself and go further on the road of Great Tao. At Lin Sun's level of cultivation, it was more important to change his state of mind and perception if he wanted to break through the realm while practicing hard cultivation in seclusion and experience in the world. The most essential objective was actually for the sake of going further on the path towards the Tao. While Lin Sun was reading the classics of Snow Province, Jintian Xianyue was not idle. She was used to getting along with Lin Sun. She picked up the teapot, took a handful of frost snow water she had just collected, and began to make tea. After a while, Lin Sun stretched his body and took a cup of spiritual tea handed by Jintian Xianyue. He took a sip and sighed with emotion. I have to say that this period of time is the most peaceful and relaxing time I have ever had. Jintian Xianyue pursed her lips and smiled. Although she was disguised by the all-living beings, her delicate and pretty charm had a unique charm to it. She also sighed with emotion in her heart. When she boarded the boat, she had never thought that she would accompany Lin Sun to travel through the primordial world in such a strange way. During this period of time, she almost forgot all kinds of troubles and things. Her body and mind were tranquil. She walked between heaven and earth, looked at the world indifferently, appreciated the customs of different places, and appreciated the variety of things in the world. Let's go. After drinking the tea, Lin Sun got up slowly and walked out of the inn. Jintian Xianyue nodded and got up to catch up with him. As she was walking, her heart suddenly trembled. In an instant, she noticed that Lin Sun's back seemed to have produced a wonderful change. He seemed to be walking leisurely, but she felt that he was in harmony with heaven and earth and all things in the world. He was walking in front of her, but she couldn't capture or respond to him in her spiritual awareness. Just like the Great Tao, invisible and unfathomable, it was omnipresent. Outside the inn, the ground was paved with black ice, which was smooth as a mirror. There was an endless stream of pedestrians on the street, and the snowflakes were like goose feathers. Lin Sun walked on the street with his hands behind his back. He looked so ordinary and inconspicuous, completely unattractive. It was as if he was in harmony with heaven and earth and all living beings. Although he was ordinary, he was there, invisible like the Great Tao. Young master, have you broken through? On the way, Jintian Xianyue finally couldn't help asking. Lin Sun casually nodded. His black eyes were deep as he walked in the wind and snow, his heart empty and tranquil. After traveling the world for more than 2 months, everything Yang Kai had seen, felt, and comprehended along the way had all transformed into a force that allowed him to break through to the next realm, allowing his cultivation to soar to the peak of the Saint King realm. From beginning to end, he didn't deliberately force it at all. It happened completely naturally. Just like the water in a teacup, when it was full, it would naturally overflow. He seemed to be walking with his hands behind his back, but in fact, the essence, qi, spirit, and strength in his body were all undergoing an amazing transformation. It was just that neither Jintian Xianyue nor the pedestrians on the street could see this magnificent spectacle of a breakthrough. Even so, Jintian Xianyue was still shocked. She had seen many scenes of breaking through the realm since she started cultivating, and she had also read many descriptions about it in the ancient books. But this was the first time he had seen someone break through to the next realm without making a sound or making a sound. It was too ordinary, too natural, like an invisible elephant, which gave people an indescribable feeling of shock and impact. For a moment, Jintian Xianyue was touched and had some enlightenment. Thinking of what she had experienced during this period of time, various thoughts emerged in her mind. Finally, she stared at Lin Sun's back in the distance and smiled silently in the bustling street of the university. She had vaguely understood something, but she couldn't tell it clearly. But she knew clearly that she seemed to be about to break through the realm. When they walked out of the city, Lin Sun suddenly stopped and said, "Since I've broken through the realm, there's no need to travel anymore. Let's go to Cloud Province immediately." Jintian Xianyue naturally had no objection. Not far from the city there was an ancient transmission array, which led to Cloud Province. At this time, there were many cultivators who had paid the spiritual crystals and walked in. Lin Sun and Jintian Xianyue paid a lot of spiritual crystals together and were about to walk into the ancient transmission array. Suddenly, Lin Sun seemed to have sensed something. He turned his head and looked at the city gate in the distance. In front of the city gate, there stood an old man and a young man. The old man was senile with silver hair and beard, and he was waving a feather fan in his hand. The young man was a young man in black, with black hair and black eyes. He had a delicate face, and the corners of his mouth were slightly pursed, forming a cold and aloof smile. Chapter 1953. Lin Sun's eyes narrowed slightly. The old man was the first one to see through his breakthrough. Other people around him, including Jintian Xianyue, didn't notice the old man and the young man at all. Fortunately, the old man just smiled and waved his hand without saying anything more. Seeing this, Lin Sun nodded, turned around and walked into the transmission formation with Jintian Xianyue. Buzz! With a roar, the transmission formation glowed, and Lin Sun and the young man disappeared. "Young master, do you see this? An exceptional genius with peerless skills, walking, sitting, and lying down is all cultivating. However, to naturally break through realms, without incomparably solid accumulations, it is destined to be impossible." Watching Lin Sun leave, the old man said in a gentle voice, "There are no lack of such amazing people in the Hongmeng world." The young man in black said coldly, "Isn't it better? I came to the Hongmeng world to defeat these so-called geniuses with my saber." His voice was as sharp and frightening as a blade. The old man smiled. "Then let's start from Yunzhou?" "Okay." The young man in black nodded. His surname was Dao and his given name was Duan Lu. His name was Duan Lu. Yunzhou, one of the 49 states in the untainted world, it had a vast territory and cities all over. Its territory was more than 10 times that of Qingzhou. There were 7 orthodoxies in Yunzhou, controlling the territory of Yunzhou. They were like 7 giants and had become the holy land of cultivation in the hearts of countless practitioners. Xuanji Taoism sect was ranked 3rd among the 7 orthodoxies in Yunzhou. Compared to the Azure Plain, the cultivation forces in the Cloud Plain were undoubtedly much larger and more powerful. The reason for this was that there were many ancient emperor clans residing in the Cloud Plain. A force like Xing family in Lin and City was not even a second-rate force in Yunzhou. In Yunzhou, the standard to measure whether a force was first class was whether there were more than 5 quasi-emperors in it. As for the 7 orthodoxies in Yunzhou, they were beyond the scope of first-class forces and could be called overlords. Each of them was stronger than the other. Beilu City. It was one of the medium-sized cities in Yunzhou. Tens of thousands of miles away from this city was the skyscraping Sword sect, one of the 7 orthodoxies. Therefore, this city was extremely prosperous and affluent. Outside Beilu City, accompanied by a strange rumble, a group of cultivators walked out of the ancient teleportation formation. Lin Sun and Jintian Xianyue were among them. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of Beilu City in Yunzhou from Thousand Flow City in Snow Province, which made Lin Sun a little absent-minded. This was the wonder of the teleportation formation. However, for an ancient teleportation formation like this, one would have to pay 100,000 myriad Tao crystals. Not everyone had the ability to borrow it. "Young master, this should be Beilu City. According to our speed, It will take at least half a month to reach the Xuanji Dao sect from here. Jintian Xianyue quickly said. On the way here, she had already studied the route and was extremely familiar with it. Let's go to this city first and gather some information about the Yunzhou. It won't be too late to set off after that. Lin Sun said and walked towards the city in the distance. He was still pondering that the old man and the young man he saw earlier were not simple. Especially the old man, he was most likely an Emperor Realm existence. I really have to keep a low profile in the primordial world. Who knows, I might run into an Emperor Realm monster. Lin Sun sighed with emotion. Big news, big news. The 7 orthodoxies have decided that in a month's time, there will be a Dao discussion in Yunzhou. At that time, after screening, 10 top figures will be selected from the 3 realms of True Saint, Great Saint, and Saint King to go to the Central Continent to participate in the Dao Discussion Grand Event sponsored by the 6 Dao Courts. What about the Immortal Realm King? Are you kidding me? How can the Immortal Realm King be qualified to participate? As soon as Lin Sun and Jintian Xianyue walked into Beilu City, they heard an excited shout on the street, causing an uproar. The Dao Discussion Grand Event in Yunzhou? Lin Sun was stunned. It didn't take long for him to understand what was going on. 3 years ago, the 6 Dao Courts announced that they would hold a Dao Discussion Grand Event in 5 years and invited all the Daoists in the world to participate. However, there were extremely harsh conditions to participate. Apart from the Central Continent, in the other 48 states of the primordial world, each state could only select 10 people from the 3 realms of True Saint, Great Saint, and Saint King. For example, only 10 people from the Saint King realm could participate in the Dao Discussion Grand Event in a state. The Dao Discussion Grand Event in Yunzhou was prepared for this. After all, the territory of Yunzhou was extremely vast, and there were 7 orthodoxies standing side by side, but the number of people who could participate in the Dao Discussion Grand Event was limited. Therefore, the 7 orthodoxies of Yunzhou decided to hold a Dao Discussion Grand Event to compete for the limited number of people. For example, the reason why I left White Emperor City this time and came to the primordial world is also to participate in the Dao Discussion Grand Event held by the 6 Dao Court. Jintian Xianyue said quickly with a trace of longing in his eyes. Lin Sun suddenly thought of Xian Juyin, the young man in linen. After arriving in the primordial world, this guy had also clamored to meet him again at the Dao Discussion Grand Event. Obviously, Xian Juyin came to the primordial world for the Dao Discussion Grand Event, just like Jintian Xianyue. If the cultivators from other star areas outside the primordial world want to participate in such a Dao Discussion Grand Event, what should they do? Lin Sun asked curiously. There are many ways, but the most direct way is to participate in the Dao Discussion Grand Event held by the various prefectures in the 48 prefectures of the primordial world and compete for a spot through battle. Jintian Xianyue said, for example, the Dao Discussion Grand Event of Yunzhou isn't just limited to the disciples of the 7 orthodoxies, any other expert that meets the requirements can participate as well. Only now did Lin Sun come to an understanding, and he said, in this way, if one wants to participate in the Dao Discussion Grand Event held by the 6 Dao Courts, then the competition is extraordinarily great. Just think about it. The 49 prefectures of the primordial world were extremely vast, and there were numerous orthodoxies and clans scattered throughout. The number of experts that possessed the 3 saint realms was so numerous that it was utterly immeasurable. But there were only a few spots, so it was obvious how intense and brutal the competition would be when it truly began. If some peerless figures from outside the primordial world participated as well, then it was bound to cause the competition that was already extremely intense to become even more intense. After all, it's a Dao Discussion Grand Event held by the 6 Dao Courts, so how could it possibly be something that just anyone can participate in? When she spoke up to hear, Jintian Xuanyue's eyes were suffused with a trace of yearning. After passing through the layers of elimination and selection, the experts that are able to participate in the Tao discussion grand event are bound to be extraordinary and peerless figures. Lin Sun thought for a moment and agreed with this point of view. However, compared to Jintian Xianyue, he wasn't really interested in the Tao discussion grand event, and it was even to the extent that he had no choice but to avoid it intentionally. It couldn't be helped. Once his true identity was discovered by the experts of the 6 Tao courts, then it would absolutely cause unimaginable trouble. Right, this is the situation in the 48 prefectures. What about the Central Plains Tao Prefecture? Could it be that the cultivators there don't have to undergo selection? Asked Lin Sun. Jintian Xianyue said, the Central Plains Tao Prefecture is the place where all emperors converge, the place where Tao fathers live in seclusion, and the top powers in the starry sky like the 6 Tao courts and 10 combat clans reside there. There's utterly no need to hold a Tao discussion there. That's because even if it's held, the final quota will be divided among the heirs of the 6 Tao courts and 10 combat clans. After a pause, she continued, moreover, the Tao discussion grand event was originally initiated by the 6 Tao courts. If their heirs participate, they won't be limited by the quota. Lin Sun smiled, I see. This naturally seemed very unfair to the other cultivators in the world, but it was also the reality. Who asked the 6 Tao courts to be so powerful? In fact, no one cares whether it's fair or not. Since ancient times, the 6 Tao courts have held Tao discussion grand events more than once, but almost all of the top 10 in the Tao discussion grand events are heirs of the 6 Tao courts and 10 combat clans, said Jintian Xianyue. Just like the King Sage list of all heavens, 90% of the peerless figures in the top 100 come from these major powers. But you're an exception, said Lin Sun with a smile. He hadn't forgotten that Jintian Xianyue was ranked 49th on the King Sage list of all heavens. Jintian Xianyue was stunned and said with some embarrassment, Child, don't laugh at me. With your combat strength, it's the most ridiculous thing that you didn't appear on the King Sage list of all heavens. Lin Sun was speechless. It was just a list. How could it possibly include all the peerless figures in the world? It was impossible. At least, enlightened Buddha and Xian Jiuyin, the youth in linen, should not be weaker than Jintian Xianyue. But their names were not on the King Sage list of all heavens. Strictly speaking, this list issued by the Yellow Tao Court was extremely authoritative, and the experts on it were destined to be peerless figures. But how vast the starry sky ancient road was! It was destined to have many peerless figures who were not weaker than those on the King Sage list of all heavens. Lin Sun shook his head and no longer paid attention to these things. But to his surprise, during his stay in Beilu City for half a day, no matter where he went, people were talking about the Tao discussion grand event of Yunzhou. Some busybodies even picked out some of the most famous descendants of the 7 orthodoxies in Yunzhou, made a list, and commented and analyzed them one by one. For example, Lu Dubu, the first descendant of the Great Void Tao sect, the first orthodoxy of Yunzhou, was recognized as the number 1 person in the King Sage realm in Yunzhou. He was also considered to be one of the most promising figures to win the first place in the Tao discussion grand event of Yunzhou. There were also some other famous peerless figures in Yunzhou, which was also a hot topic. It was difficult for Lin Sun not to know them. But it also showed how great the impact of the Tao discussion grand event of Yunzhou was. Unfortunately, Lin Sun was still not interested in it. On the same day, he left with Jintian Xianyue and went straight to the place where the Xuanji Tao sect was located, Divine Wind Tao Mountain. P.S. Since last night, Xia Ji has cast a dense number of monthly vote. This month, she has cast a total of 1 million vertical coins. There were also gifts from Huang Lianping, Zenacino, Audi Never Die, Shuyu 37440253, Gung Xiansen, Bosfeng, Qing Yuli and so on. Chapter 1954. Divine Wind Taoist Mountain. Located in the easternmost part of Yunzhou, this mountain was high and undulating. It was surrounded by clouds all year round with divine brilliance. It was a first-class blessed place. It should be known that this was the primordial world, where the aura of chaos between heaven and earth was extremely strong. Any blessed place that could be called a blessed place was a pure land for cultivation that all practitioners dreamed of. Xuanji Taoist sect, one of the 7 orthodoxies in Yunzhou, was entrenched in this mountain. Half a month later, Lin Sun and Jintian Xianyue appeared in front of Divine Wind Taoist Mountain. Looking at the undulating, beautiful and lofty mountains from afar, Lin Sun couldn't help but feel a little shocked. What a blessed place it was! The aura of chaos visible to the naked eye evolved into a huge python and dragon, hanging over the sky of the mountain, and the auspicious light and divine light were steaming like a sea of clouds. At a glance, people couldn't help but suspect that it was a pure land where immortals lived, which couldn't be found in the world. Let's go to the mountain gate. Lin Sun went straight forward. Thousands of meters away from the towering ancient mountain gate, a group of practitioners in feather robes rushed out of the mountain gate. "Who are you?" asked a tall man with a calm look. "I'm Jin Di, and I want to see your leader," Lin Sun said casually. If he said directly that he wanted to see Boyazi, he would definitely be kicked out as a lunatic. After all, Boyazi was the founder of Xuanji Taoist sect, which had existed for countless years. It was hard to say whether such an ancient figure was still alive. "You want to see our leader?" The tall man was stunned. "Do you have an invitation?" Lin Sun shook his head. "I'm here to discuss something important with your leader. Please inform him." With that, Lin Sun cupped his hands. Seeing Lin Sun's polite attitude, the tall man relaxed a lot and said, "Taoism peer, I don't mind informing him for you at ordinary times, but not today." "Why is that?" Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. The tall man's expression was uncertain as he said, "It's not convenient for me to tell you the reason. I hope fellow Taoist can forgive me. Perhaps fellow Taoist can come back after a while." With that, these successors of Xuanji Taoist sect were about to return to the mountain gate. "Wait." Jintian Xianyue suddenly spoke. "My young master has traversed 7 provinces and crossed mountains and rivers to get here. Yet, he's been rejected by you. Isn't it a little unreasonable?" The tall man frowned and his expression was gloomy. "Without a visiting card or proof, how can my sect's leader be seen by just anyone? Please go back." He directly ordered the guests to leave. Jintian Xianyue tossed a token into the air and said, "This is the white monarch token of the monarch race, Jintian clan. Do you think I'm qualified to meet your clan master?" The tall man was shocked. He took the token and looked at it. The front side was engraved with the words, Jintian clan, and the back side was engraved with a totem of White Sovereign City. Holding it in his hand, a sharp and domineering aura assaulted his senses. The monarch race, Jintian clan. Even though this clan wasn't in the prehistoric world, everyone knew that it was a colossus that was renowned in the starry sky. In the primordial world, they would be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the primordial emperor clans. The tall man hesitated. The descendants of Xuanji Taoist sect around him were also surprised. Although they had heard of the Jintian clan, they had never seen such a unique treasure as the White Monarch token. If you can't tell whether it's real or fake, go and inform your leader. If the leader of Xuanji Taoist sect can't even recognize the White Monarch token, then we have nothing to say. Jintian Xianyue looked indifferent. "Okay, please wait a moment," the tall man said and hurried away. Seeing this, Jintian Xianyue whispered, "Child, you won't blame me for making the decision without authorization, will you?" Lin Sun shook his head with a smile. At the same time, a girl with bright eyes and white teeth in a feather robe couldn't help asking, You're not here to challenge senior brother Ji Qian, are you?" Lin Sun was stunned. Of course, he knew Ji Qian. According to Jiang Heng, this person was the first successor of Xuanji Taoist sect. However, he didn't intend to challenge Ji Qian at all this time. No. Lin Sun shook his head. The girl in the feather robe was still suspicious. She frowned and said, "I hope so." Looking at the expressions of the other disciples of Xuanji Taoist sect, there was a lingering worry between their eyebrows and their hearts were heavy. This made Lin Sun puzzled. Did someone break into Xuanji Taoist sect today and challenge Ji Qian? Not long after, a tall and sturdy figure in a purple robe, black hair and white eyebrows swept out of the mountain gate. His eyes were flowing with divine light as he opened and closed them. He exuded the power of the quasi-emperor realm with every move. "Greetings, Uncle Hongyu." The men and women bowed in unison. The purple-robed man called Uncle Hongyu waved his hand and set his eyes on Lin Sun and Jintian Xianyue. "Are you two Taoist friends from the Jintian clan?" The purple-robed man said in a deep voice, neither humble nor arrogant. "Yes." Jintian Xianyue nodded. "My Taoist name is Hongyu. The leader specially ordered me to come and welcome you." The purple-robed man, Hongyu, cupped his hands and said, "Thank you." Lin Sun also cupped his hands. Immediately, Hongyu made a "please" gesture and led the way. Lin Sun and Jintian Xianyue followed closely behind. They really are the experts of the Jintian clan. I heard that the ancestor of the Jintian clan, Primordial White Emperor, is a famous legendary figure whose power shakes the heavens. Alas, don't worry about this. This time, it's bad. Those guys from Mysterious Void Island said that they want to compete with the descendants of our Xuanji Taoist sect. They really don't come with good intentions. I just don't know if senior brother Ji Qian can accept these challenges. Watching Lin Sun and the others enter the mountain gate, the descendants of Xuanji Taoist sect sighed and frowned. After entering the mountain gate, the view suddenly changed. The mountains were like halberds, rising into the sky, flying immortal birds and resting spirit beasts. Every mountain peak was bathed in divine brilliance and overflowing with immortal qi. What they breathed in through their noses and mouths were all thick spiritual qi. They felt as if they were soaking in spring water, comfortable and relaxed. In the past, Hongyu would definitely patiently introduce the beautiful scenery of the Divine Wind Taoist Mountain to the two distinguished guests from the Jintian clan. But at this time, he was really not in the mood. "May I ask why the two of you have come to see our sect leader?" On the way, Hongyu couldn't help asking. "It's just a normal visit. I have no other intentions." Lin Sun could also see that the atmosphere of Xuanji Taoist sect was a little strange today. "Oh," Hongyu replied. After a moment of deliberation, he said, "To tell you the truth, my Xuanji Dao sect has encountered some troublesome matters today. If there's anything that we can't take good care of, I hope the two of you can forgive us." Although he was a quasi-emperor, he didn't dare to neglect the distinguished guests from the Jintian clan. This was the power of the White Emperor token. Lin Sun nodded and said, "Fellow Taoist, if possible, can you tell me about this so-called troublesome matter?" Hongyu thought for a while and sighed, "Well, you will definitely see it later, so there's no harm in telling you in advance." It turned out that this morning, Mysterious Void Island, one of the 7 major orthodoxies of Yunzhou, sent a group of core descendants to Xuanji Taoist sect to pay a visit. Although it was said to pay a visit, it was actually to spar and discuss the Tao. Originally, it was normal for the descendants of 2 orthodoxies to spar and challenge each other. But the key was that Mysterious Void Island had come with ill intentions. Xuanji Taoist sect was ranked 3rd among the orthodoxies of Yunzhou, while Mysterious Void Island was ranked 4th. In other words, in terms of ranking, Mysterious Void Island had always been suppressed by Xuanji Taoist sect. This time, the descendants of Mysterious Void Island came to take the opportunity of the challenge to deal a heavy blow to the descendants of Xuanji Taoist sect. This proved that among the younger generation, Mysterious Void Island was already firmly above Xuanji Taoist sect. This seemed to be a battle between the younger generation, but in reality, It involved the face of the two orthodoxies. How could Xuanji Taoist sect dare to be negligent? Moreover, according to Hong Yu, mysterious Void Island came prepared this time, and the descendants they sent were each stronger than the last. This was something that Xuanji Taoist sect had never expected. We know almost all of the famous successors of mysterious space Divine Island. However, there are many unfamiliar faces among those who came to challenge us. We have never heard of mysterious space Divine Island excepting these successors. All of their combat strength is so strong that it is shocking. Hong Yu frowned and a haze appeared on his face. At this point, Lin Sun finally understood why he was rejected at the door when he came to pay a visit. It turned out that Xuanji Taoist sect was in trouble. Along the way, Lin Sun also learned that the descendants of Xuanji Taoist sect were divided into 4 types: outer disciples, inner disciples, true disciples, and core disciples. Among them, the outer disciples were the most numerous. They were all below the immortal level king realm, and were regarded as disciples. The inner disciples were at the true sage realm. Only those who had stepped into the great sage realm were qualified to be accepted as true disciples. And the core disciples were Holy King Jueshio. However, the number of core disciples was relatively the least. For example, Xuanji Taoist sect, one of the 7 orthodoxies of Yunzhou, only had more than 30 core disciples. Even so, Lin Sun was still shocked. How powerful was Holy King Jueshio? But in Xuanji Taoist sect, he was only a core disciple. If that was the case, how powerful would the 6 major Dao courts be? This might be a scene that only the primordial world could have, and it was worthy of being the number 1 world on the starry ancient path. As they spoke, they arrived at the peak of a sacred mountain. This was a huge platform surrounded by a sea of clouds. At this moment, there were many figures distributed on the platform. One of them was the cultivators of Xuanji Taoist sect, and the leader was a skinny middle-aged man in a Taoist robe and a feather crown. He had his hands behind his back, and he looked dignified. He was surrounded by a group of big shots like stars surrounding the moon. Beside these big shots, there were also many descendants. That is our sect leader.